Good afternoon, race fans, and welcome to the final round here of the HCCL Karussell Cup, live exclusively on TRTN. As always, I'm Regan Clark, and as you've just heard there, it's our final stop here in the three-parter that has comprised the Karussell Cup for the last 2 weeks of racing, with today, its third week, being the last time we'll see them. Right here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife, as always, 170 turns and 15.7 miles of FIA Grade 3, and where we've seen two different categories charter their courses over the course of 2 weeks of racing, the M2 Cups and the GT4s, won by Matthew Copsey and Tom Breuer. We're at the final stop here, heading into round 3 at the peak of production car racing in GT3. The final step then in the evolution toward the prototype family, the GT3s have outlasted everything to have come before them, outlasting former GT2, GT2B and GTE, as well as GT1. They're the head and shoulders now of all things Grand Touring, the pinnacle of the touring car ethos. As we see here, Manuel Lamoth making his way out of pit and Warsteiner corner, and taking a look into the championship standings and balance of performance today as we make our way through free practice, we find ourselves at an impasse with plenty of joint decisions due to the drop round introduced to a severe outage of PlayStation Network players in round 1 of the championship. It gives us what is by and large one of the most bizarre standings we've ever had the opportunity to cover. Looking here, it's a joint first place between Matthew Copsey and Tom Breuer, who find themselves joint first with 45 points apiece, of course both of our race winners. And then a joint third for Alberto Aragoneses and Mr. Scallops with 39 points. James Mason finds himself joint fifth with Asahi Ota with 34 points. One of our only definitive positions on this top 10, Thomas Ferre in 7th with a 30-point margin. And then we find a joint 8th place between Tom Wells and Václav Pospisil with 27 points apiece. Rounding out the top 10 is Stephen Sutton in a joint 10th place with Fabian Hodek, who doesn't appear on the charts as he's down in what is technically 11th place. It is a joint 10th for 25 points apiece. A very bizarre top 10, and the championship for this micro series still hangs in the balance here, but from the rumours I hear in the paddock, this could be a swing state here for the Nissan GTR. Number 159, formerly the McLaren number 159 of Tom Breuer, round 2's race winner, who finds himself at joint top of the charts there with Matthew Copsey, who, so I am led to believe, is not competing in this round of the championship. Now we'll see whether or not that is the whole case heading into today's session. Getting a look at the session itinerary then, heading in to round 3 in the final round here. It's the same 20 minutes of free practice and 20 minutes of qualifying we've seen for the last 2 weeks, but the caveat being 90 minutes of racing as opposed to the 1 hour and 15 minutes we saw last week and the 1 hour we saw the week before that. Plenty of new names on the grid as well. We'll be getting through quite a few of them over the course of today. Let's just quickly stay on board here with the race winner of round 2, and it was a decisive entry for the 159 of Tom Breuer. He really did put on quite the show in his inaugural drive in this championship. We see here with the 159 now driving what is arguably one of Japan's most popular sports cars, the Nissan GTR. Powered by the same 3.8-litre VR38 DETT twin-turbo V6 engine that's been the beating heart of the Nissan GTR platform since 2007. It's up there with the likes of the Toyota Supra, the Subaru Impreza, and the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution as some of the most iconic cars to have ever left Japan. This is the final generation, of course, of the Nissan GTR, what used to be known as the Godzilla. Back in its heyday, competing in touring car racing in the early 1990s under the R32. This model, the R35, is sadly the last of its kind. Nissan announced they will not be making an R36 model. What you see here with this 2017 unit is what you get. We're getting onto the discussion of balanced performance not too far from now. We'll be seeing where Nissan stacks up against a myriad of manufacturers on this grid. We can also see driving for Nissan is Mr. Scallops in the 394, but I want to try and get a look on board here with some of the new faces joining us for this round. We can also see this will be a bizarre talking point a little later down the line. That's Fabian Hodek in a not in a Nissan, sorry, in a BMW M6 GT3. Now we'll talk about that in due course. We see Alessandro Litti here on his first round at the last stop of this championship in the 123 Ferrari. We see here, this is Anthony Valorio. We actually saw him last round, if I'm not mistaken, with McLaren. Actually, no, sorry, with Chevrolet. That's my mistake. I was thinking of a different championship there. And we can see here, Luca Tamburini in the 813. I believe we have actually seen this one before. I think this was back in the M2 wing. You can see here, this is one of the new drivers for this grid. Now, he had signed up a few weeks before, but this is the first we see of him. It's Alexander Kruger in the number 507. He's one of two Krugers to have signed up, the other one being Sebastian Kruger, who is set to drive in the 314 Bentley Continental. And speaking of Bentley, they do find themselves mysteriously absent from this grid. Now, taking a look at the session metrics, 12 drivers entered for Bentley. None of them have shown up so far. With 13 minutes left to go in free practice, it does make for a very erroneous state of affairs for the Bentley Continental, which under balance of performance today was looking to get quite the hefty benefit. We see here, this is Stephen Sutton behind the wheel of the Ford Mustang, making his way currently down through towards the Adnar Forst section in the number 7. On board with Stephen Sutton. Getting a look at the balance of performance then at long last. Let's get a look here as we find Jaguar and BMW atop the balance of performance weight reduction charts, 40 kilos apiece there. Sutton pulls it into one side after the Adnar Force. So who better to get on board with than one of those two cars in question? Fabian Hodek in the BMW M6. He'll be at joint level there with Pascal Stoltz, who's driving in the Jaguar XK-G3. That's been the center point of a championship we've been covering for the last couple of months here on TRTN. The Jaguar GT3 Revival Series by Competizione Performance League, the season finale, as a matter of fact, coming up this coming Wednesday. They find themselves 40 kilos apiece then taken off coming into this round. Lexus in third with 18 kilos reduced. Nissan losing 2 kilos then into the positives. McLaren gaining 1 kilo. Ferrari gaining 6. Ford gaining 7, Bentley gaining 13, and BMW gaining 15 with the M4. So a real story of extremes for the BMW team, with the M6 right now driven by Fabian Hodek is a very rare example. I believe this might be a world first for us on TRTN. I think we've covered GT racing for quite a few, I want to say years now. It's been since we've started covering things all the way back in the days of TRR, but never once before had we seen the M6 in the flesh. We've always seen screenshots, we've always heard rumors, heard stories, but now we really do get to see it, and it is quite the unicorn, this vehicle. Of course, it was built to introduced, I should say, to replace the BMW Z4 GT3 in 2016. It was built, of course, on the M6 Coupe chassis and features a 4.4-litre twin-turbo V8 engine making upwards of 577 brake horsepower, all of it at a target weight of 1,300 kilos or less. It was later replaced down the line by the BMW M8 GTE before the GTE category was annulled in the early 2020s, replaced in whole heart by the BMW M4. Makes his way down through Karussell. It is truly quite a brute, that machine there, and from what we've been able to see, and there you have it, there's been quite a few stability concerns for the M6 coming into this round of the championship. We see here, this is Alessandro Litti making his way out of Stylestrecker in towards the Karussell. We'll see precisely what he gets up to around here. The number 1, 2, 3 runs it out short, so a lot of drivers struggling in through to Karussell. And I think we do have another driver coming up on that section here, just on the exit of Klostertal. This is the 394 of Mr. Scallops. We'll stay on board with this one here. On his way out of Stylestrecker, Mr. Scallops in the 394 Nissan GTR, one of two offerings from Nissan today, the other being, of course, the 159 of Tom Breuer. Out through Karussell, and that's much silkier smooth than the remainder of the two that we saw just before. Third time's the charm then, as it seems, for the Karussell. That was very, very sharp there for Mr. Scallops. We also see this is James Mason at the moment, who most recently remarked that with 14 kilos on his M4, he is quote-unquote screwed for this round. But I don't think that's wholeheartedly the case. He's currently finding himself not too far down the order. He's, of course, joint level with Asahi Ota, who is in this session in something I am quite surprised to see here. He's driving for BMW. Now, this came as quite the shock to me because, of course, as we all know, Asahi Ota, especially down in GT4, has been quite the sole proprietor of Aston Martin's presence in the High Caliber Community League. So it definitely does come as quite the shock to see him not choose the Vantage GT3. If anyone was going to be choosing it, it would have likely been the Japanese talent in the 55, but he'll race for BMW. And that is definitely quite a bizarre sign. So he'll not be the only one bearing the weight of that sizable weight increase there for the M4. See here, Anthony Valorio in the Lexus RCF. And we've seen somewhat of a renaissance in the last couple of months for the Lexus RCF. We've seen it on quite a few different stages here where teams feel confident enough to enter competitive entries with the RCF, a relatively ancient platform by comparison to the modern age technology we have now out of Ford, McLaren and Ferrari. Lexus is still able to hold a pretty decent candle to the new gen offerings. It's really a case where if it's not broke, don't fix it. And this has been the modus operandi of Lexus for so many years, to the point where only now have they just introduced a model to replace it. And that's come from Toyota, their parent company, with the GR-GT. Rumours are plenty that Lexus will be the brand to adorn that vehicle in the IMSA Sports Car Championship, whilst Toyota continues their efforts to represent themselves in something like the World Endurance Championship. For that RCF, it's tried, true, reliable technology here. And the 41 having a good go of it. He makes his way onto the Nordschleife section. Now, surprisingly so, coming into this round, we don't have a comprehensive understanding of what the top 10 is going to look like for the qualifying predictions. So for the first time, I think, in this series, we're heading into qualifying 8 minutes from now completely blind. What we do know is times are in the ranges north of an 8 minutes 15, with some scraping into an 8:13, even the highs of an 8 minutes 12 by one such driver with Ford. We'll see exactly whether or not that's going to be the case in the coming qualifying session. Things are still looking very favourable, of course. No mixture of weather conditions for this championship so far, and today doesn't look to be anything to upset that balance. So we stay on board here with Valorio. On his trails is Fabian Hodek, the two heavyweight V8 cars. 4.4 litre BMW V8 versus 5.4 litre Lexus V8, making their way out through Flugplatz. It's got quite some thunder to it. It is a beautiful, beautiful engine in that Lexus. Oh, that's a mistake there. We had all of the placards replaced in due course, but it seems that sneaking its way back in for Valorio was his old GT4 placard, in which he competed with McLaren. That's a bit of a bizarre one. Well, sincerest apologies there. I would say it's a bit of a odd-looking McLaren, all things considered. That's Valorio in the 41 Lexus. And speaking of odd, here is Pascal Stoltz in the Jaguar XK-G3. Now, of course, we've seen a championship full of these Jaguars, but very rarely have we seen one compete alongside anything else in the GT3 family. Of course, the XK-G3 uses a modified version, I should say, of the Jaguar AJ V8 engine, first introduced in 1996 now, as opposed to 1998. The very same engine that would be used in 2006 as a license-built platform loaned out to Aston Martin for the basis of their V8 Vantage engine in the mid to late 2000s, I should say. And this engine under the bonnet is the very same 5-litre unit that was, well, later outboard to 5 litres, that went on to power a myriad of vehicles in the Jaguar and Land Rover family, including the SVR platform that powers both the Jaguar F-Type and the Range Rover SVR. So this is a very versatile platform that the XK lives upon. Of course, this wasn't made by Jaguar themselves. This was made by a company called Emil Frey Racing. This was an engineering project for them for the 2012 Blancpain Endurance Series, where they took a Jaguar and custom engineered it into the motor we see today. The engine was prepared by Brackley-based Ilmore Engineering. Not Brackley, sorry, Brixworth-based Ilmore Engineering. An engine producer based out of Northamptonshire that's worked with IndyCar and Formula One throughout its lifespan, and worked on this very engine, turning the AJ V8 into a competitive platform. Bored up to 5 litres, this engine. It's naturally aspirated, and quite the thunder on this venue here. And Stoltz is going to be finding himself staring down another ample challenge. Of course, we saw him race with Maserati last weekend. He seems to not be the kind of person to shy away from an interesting challenge, and today being no exemption. In his final stop in the Karussell Cup, Stoltz is driving for Jaguar. There we do actually get to see the first of our Bentleys. Tom Wells shows up with the Bentley, and that is quite a fancy set of colours there. I didn't think orange would work on a Bentley. Always thought that was more of a McLaren avenue, but my goodness, it is quite the looker. Out on track at the moment, we can see the 413 of James Mason, but there you can see as he makes his way through Adnauer with nose damage on that 413, so one can only question what's gone on there for James Mason. Now, for our drivers, there is the chances here, if they don't dilly-dally, they don't waste any time here, that they could maybe, just maybe, get about 2 laps. If not, and very, very high possibility that it won't be, but the very small possibility that it could be 3 laps in qualifying if they really, really hammer down. Now, 20 minutes, not a lot of time to work with in a normal qualifying session, even less to work with here at the Nürburgring, where laps are over 8 minutes long each for our top-of-the-line GT3. So they're really up against it in the final qualifying session. In terms of championship stakes, things are still looking quite hopeful for the Nissan GTR number 159 of, if we can try and find him here, of Tom Breuer. Last time there, 8 minutes 12.987. So the rumors are true, and 8 minutes 12 is possible in this session, and it's been done by Nissan. Getting a look then at those timing charts before we get on to qualifying today. We only find 4 times on the charts there. Tom Breuer, Mr. Scallops, Thomas Ferre and Alessandro Litti on the charts at the moment. Nearest to the line to put a time on the charts looks to be the number 41, mistakenly identified to be driving for McLaren there. An error with our graphics, but the 41 Lexus of Anthony Valorio currently making his way down through Flansgarten 2. In through to the Schwabenschwan section. Now, this is going to be quite interesting to watch because as we no doubt know as well, for those of you who've been long-time viewers, and I can actually happily report we have now fixed Valorio's graphics, so that was quite the bizarre one there. But for those of you who've been long-time viewers of TRTN, you'll no doubt know that we have been somewhat fascinated in the last couple of months with the topic of straight-line speed, especially when Lexus, Ford and BMW are all in said conversation. And heading down the Dottinger, these 3 manufacturers will be dominating the field by a long shot here. Straight-line speed has already been quite an important factor, and it's what has allowed for such great form out of McLaren last round, courtesy of Tom Breuer. That dominant straight line speed from the 570S allowed him to walk on by several people over the course of this race, last gone, I should say. For today, all eyes are going to be set on the big 3, as it were, Lexus, Ford, and BMW. Right now, no one's been able to hold a candle to Nissan, who lead this free practice session in a 1-2 formation. We'll see what Valorio can do in the way of things here. The battle of the Japanese manufacturers as Lexus now puts their hat in the ring. The 41 down to the line. Where will he position himself? Predictions in and around 2nd place here for him. He's 4th as he crosses the line and behind Thomas Ferre by about 1.5 seconds there. 1.515 seconds to be precise between himself and the number 84 BMW. Definitely quite a bizarre one then. Nearest to the line, Manuel Lamoth. We saw him last week, I believe, with Porsche. And he's sticking on the theme of German manufacturers, but not going with the 992 like theory would suggest. He's gone to the M4, and it's really not hard to see where BMW's successes with the M4 has come from. Of course, it's powered by the P58 3-litre inline-6 engine with a 6-speed sequential X-Track gearbox. It gives this car some unparalleled straight-line speed, and it's much smaller, much lighter, much more petite than its previous offerings, the M8, the M6, and the Z4. This seems to be the golden formula, the golden ratio, as it were, for the successes for BMW. It's gone on to be one of their most successful offerings in recent years. Down towards Tiergarten then, Lamoth to the line. Does he go faster than Ferre? That's the question. He's looking to gun for his fellow BMW, but finds himself playing second fiddle to Lexus at the back of that top 5. Nearest to the line as well comes the number 12, Tom Wells, with Bentley. Down towards the line to what appears to be start a flying lap with the Bentley Continental. It is quite the juggernaut, that car as well. 4-litre twin-turbo V8 engine. Co-engineered by M Sport UK, the same brainiacs behind the Ford Puma Rally 1. Heading down the RTL in towards the Ford curve then. It's going to be exciting to see what Bentley can do. Now, it's a bit disappointing to see that of the 12 drivers to have entered with Bentley, only one of them has shown up, but I'm quite glad that it's Tom Wells, because if previous choices have been anything to go by, Wells seems to be able to operate just about with just about whatever car, is what the point I'm trying to get at here. He's been the kind of driver that can operate with just about any form of machinery. If it has 4 wheels and an engine, he can drive it to at least the top 50% in a good set of conditions. The Bentley we've seen, like the Lexus RCF, has been undergoing somewhat of a renaissance. It's starting to return to popularity with more and more teams picking up the Bentley Continental, I should say, in recent months. I think most notable examples at the moment include the Maloir Racing team over on the NLRL Console Endurance Series. They're the only team to field an all Bentley lineup. We also have the exclusive esports number 788 Bentley that is leading the championship in season 2 of the Console Endurance Series. And speaking of, later on this evening at 6 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, we'll be going live for the 6 hours of Silverstone. A delayed round after the outages of the last 2 weeks forced this event to today. We'll be picking up where we left off then for round 4 of that championship. Right now, though, we're in round 3, the final stop of the High Caliber Community League Karussell Cup. A 3-parter series here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife as we head into the winter months. And tomorrow we'll be coming back to HCCL for the coverage of the 2.4-hour charity race for St Jude's Children's Hospital. We'll be coming to you live from Stavelot, Belgium at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Right now, though, we're still here in the Nürburgring, as we've been for the last 2 weeks. And at the end of free practice at the moment, we're not far from the start of 20 minutes of qualifying here in the Nürburgring for the last time in the Karussell Cup. And if you haven't already gotten sick of my very poor pronunciation of German corners, believe me, you're going to get your fill today as we're going around this track faster than we ever have before in the Karussell Cup. Coming into qualifying today, we'll get on board with the first drivers out amongst the fray to get our comprehensive breakdown for the last time of the Nürburgring Nordschleife. You see, though, with Tom Wells, he's among one of the last drivers out on track, the other being the number 123 of Alessandro Litti. So this session currently ticking over into qualifying does sit solely on the shoulders right now of whether or not Wells invalidates in the next 6 minutes and 40 seconds. That's the session timer as we head in towards the Adenauer Forst section. Is a Herculean challenge, this track, and the drivers will be seeing it on both barrels today in the fastest offerings that Assetto Corsa Competizione has to offer, and it's the fastest most race cars can get before we start touching into the territory of the Le Mans prototype family or the Formula family. Neither of those two categories, though, seemingly brave enough to race here at the Nordschleife. This is the tip of the spear for the fastest machines around. Now, in terms of straight line speed, you'd be looking over towards the 600 to 700 horsepower offerings of GT2. For GT3, pound for pound, they're the fastest things going around this track before you start talking about one-off time attack prototypes. Down through the Asphalt Breitscheid. He's on his way up towards Bergwerk, and I am quite surprised here to see how long the number 12 is willing to toe the line here, knowing that qualifying is just around the corner. He's trying to get just as much groundwork in before he starts his qualifying run. So Tom Wells is not wasting any opportunity with the chance he's been given here. Now, we've seen him perform to great standard with less than orthodox British machines before, like the Ginetta G55. So we see what he can do with its sort of bigger brother, as it were, in the terms of oddball right-hand drive British machines. So in towards, looking at it here, in towards Mutzkurve, in towards Klostertal and Stahlstrecke. So he'll be heading down towards the Karussell in a moment's time. Now, we've seen a few drivers make their way through the section to a mixture of successes. I think the cleanest run we've seen from our point of view has been that of Mr. Scallops in the 394. Now, of course, Tom Breuer's 8.9 seconds up the road, so you could definitely make the argument that he too has had a smooth run. Let's see what the Bentley can do as one of the biggest cars on this grid, and runs all the way over And I think that very nearly cost him the lap time in its entirety there, nearly invalidated and brought about an earlier start than what he'd like at the moment. It'd be a late start technically now for qualifying. 15 cars in all so far heading into qualifying today. A mixture of manufacturers on the grid: Bentley, BMW, Ferrari. We've just seen their Porsche, the 992 of Luca Tamburini, Jaguar as well, Lexus and Nissan. As we wait here, we've sort of bated breath. Down towards Brünchen we go with Tom Wells. Now, he's not going to be blowing the socks off of any times there with the run that he had down through Karussell, but he is looking to use this as valuable data heading into qualifying, in towards Flansgart 9s on his way towards Sprunghögel. This is where things could get very dicey for him here, in towards Sprunghögel. Now, it's a heavy car, even with its weight reduction. It's quite a big car there. Very easy for the front end to catch air from underneath it. Very flat underneath on those Bentleys. We have a limited data set on what these cars can and can't do here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. So Tom Wells is really treading on uncharted ground for Bentley. See there, a little bit of upset on the brakes in towards the Schwalbenschwanz. He had to correct the car halfway through the corner there. That's why it looked like it was sort of slowing all the way down. He did have to deal with a little touch of oversteering towards a kleiner Karussell. Second time's the charm there. A little bit cleaner than what he had out of the normal Caracciolo Karussell a few corners back in towards Galgenkopf. And this is the dark horse for straight line speed. Now, we have seen that Bentley, when really pushed to it, are no slouches at all. The 4 hours of Bathurst would tell you the same story, where the 788 had a pretty solid time with Bentley. Ultimately, that race was won by the 791, the Porsche of Fabio Farr and Tyler Vermack. Still, it's not to scoff at the successes that the 788 has had everywhere else. Straight line speed is still very much so on the side of Bentley. But whether or not they can hold a candle to BMW, to Ford, to Lexus, I mean, this is a broadly different question. This is what we've got to start asking ourselves heading into qualifying, of which we are not too far away from now. So with Tom Wells, it's been quite the pleasure to watch on board with the Bentley on its first flying lap. It's been a bit of a mixed bag for him, but he's learned a lot of valuable lessons in very short amount of time. So making his way down towards the line there with just about a minute and a half left to go. And this will be the marking point for the start of qualifying down to the line where Tom Wells. We'll get a look at those times in just a moment's time, but now 20 minutes of qualifying underway and getting on board with our drivers out onto the field. We'll see who is first among the fray. By looks of it here, it's Fabian Hodek in the BMW M6. He's followed by Mr. Scallops and Tom Breuer, the twin Nissans, on their way in towards the Yokohama S's here. Pascal Stoltz in pursuit as well in that oddball Jaguar. I think that's the quite lovely nature I think we find about these shorter series. You do get drivers going to that out of the ordinary direction. They're going for these very bizarre choices of vehicle that you don't often get to see in a longer form championship. And since this is for a lot of drivers just sort of a finale throwaway round, there's not really a lot riding on the line in terms of championships. For Hodek, he finds himself joint 10th with Steven Sutton, so so long as he stays ahead of that Mustang, he's really not got a lot to worry about. He's recently shifted over there for Tom Breuer and Mr. Scallops. The two Nissans now leading the charge as we make our way on to the start of our flying laps here in qualifying. As mentioned before, sadly, we don't have enough data to give us a comprehensive understanding of what a predicted top 10 is looking like. With too many drivers trying too many cars, it's clogged up the data set with a lot of jumbled information. So we're heading into this session effectively blind. For the 159, though, it's looking hopeful for a back-to-back pole position. Tom Breuer, of course, one down in the GT4s with McLaren, now drives for Nissan. And what is an ambitious turn of direction. Now, most would have thought with Tom Breuer whether or not he would have leveraged his ties with NRW Performance and gone with Ferrari, whether or not he would have kept on the McLaren tree and gone to the 720S. I think it's definitely come as quite a shock to many that he would choose the Nissan, but as we've seen so far, it's not actually the worst choice he's made. We stay on board here with Breuer. He'll be our unofficial tour guide here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife for the last time this season. And with thunderous sound from that screaming V6 engine, we head down into turns 1 and 2 here at the Yokohama S's, sometimes also called the Castrol S's, depending on the championship. Here, though, it's Yokohama. Heading down the RTL then, in towards the Ford curve. You can see clipping the cones on the outside of that corner, making his way then into turn 6, now to, actually what would be turn 6 is actually turns 5 and 6 now. Turns actually might be even turns 3 and 4. I mean, I can't tell at this point. Out through the Ford curve, in towards the Dunlop curve. Normally, we're used to having that whole Mercedes arena section before us, so this is quite swift into our minds to enter this area of the track so early on. But of course, compared with 170 turns in total of this particular layout, the N24 that was introduced in 2002 and the way we know it today, there is a lot to process from here on out. Up the Schumacher S as we go then in towards Bitten-Warsteiner. And what would be turns 11 and 12 here at the normal GP Strecker. Heading towards Hatzenbecksburg, and then that fast right-hander, the prelude for the run into the Vidal chicane. You can see actually as we come up on the Vidal chicane, that much sharper squared off chicane, the NGK chicane that's used in the Eiffel Grand Prix back in 2020. Can be sighted there to the left, but on the exit of the Vidal chicane, we won't be taking the right-hander into Coca-Cola curve. No, we'll be heading into the left-hander, bringing us into the start of Hatzenbeck and the Nordschleife section. So this is the Hatzenbeck section, and this is where things can really be made or broken very early on. It's a twisty section of the track, very, very tight, not a lot of room for compromise, and you've got to get friendly with those curbs, otherwise you're just not going to see the most benefit out of a flying lap. And right off the bat, Tom Breuer has understood the assignment perfectly, because he's attacking every single curb that one can attack without losing even so much as a shred of momentum. So he rockets his way out of the Hoheneichen now in towards the Kittelbacher Hohe on his run up to Flugplatz. We try not to think too much about what's happened to Nissan down at Flugplatz. On its way then, up through Kottenborn in towards Schwedenkreuz. You can see though that Nissan, it's a little bit unstable, but I think this slight instability is actually what Breuer's been seeking out. He needs a car that's very ragged edge. On his way out through Auenberg and Poststrasse, down through to the Fuchsrohr. On his way to Adenauer Forst now. Still on board with that 159, and he has been absolutely brutalizing this track. I dread to think what Breuer's capable of if we were to stick him in something like the Console Endurance Series last season in that Nissan we see on screen at the moment, because left to his own devices, he has been uncaged and unleashed on this track. On the exit of the Adenauer Forst, now heading in towards Metzgerfeld and Kallenhardt on the run into the forest section. Through Metzgerfeld. Very little area of runoff there. We've seen quite a few drivers run too far out to the right-hand side and catch themselves by the tails on the run into Kallenhardt. This is just, it's elegant. It's poetry out of this Nissan. I mean, what a great send-off to one of the most legendary cars to have ever left Japan. Then this absolutely gorgeous lap we're seeing so far by Tom Breuer. It's all the way to the ragged edge here. For the longest time, fun fact, I never really seemed to understand the allure of the Nordschleife. I saw it as sort of a large track in my early days, and I kept that opinion quite closely to myself, because obviously it's quite a controversial take in the face of things, especially with the real cult of following that a track like the Nordschleife has. But really, you watch laps like these, and it really all starts to make sense as to why this track is such a magnetic presence in the world of motorsports. You watch a track like this and how brutal it can be, and you watch laps like this, which makes all of the chaos of all 170 turns, all 15.7 miles of FIA Grade 3 and Grade 2 and Grade 1 as a bizarre chimera of available tarmac sets, ranging from the GP Strecker to what we see here in the Nordschleife. And it all starts to make sense. What we are seeing here is less lapping, and it's more almost dancing, as it were. There's something strangely flowing and poetic of it all in the way that that Nissan is being commanded around track at the moment on its way in towards Mutkirche, and it just looks effortless. It looks weightless on its way through these corners. flying his way out, a little scrape with the wall there, and it really does go to show how fine the margins of performance are for drivers like Breuer, and for this car in particular. I've never seen a car be pushed so vigorously to the edge. On the exit there of Styles Tracker in towards the Karussell for the last time then in what looks to be qualifying. Now, of course, he still has it in the bookings here for one more flying lap, so I might have to hold my tongue on that term. Heading out through Karussell. And I think what we are seeing here, folks, is a real rare thing indeed. We could be looking at Nissan on pole. I really do have this steadfast in my mind. Looking at the performance here, you could have stuck him in anything. And if he's performing to the standard like this, he could have put a Jaguar on pole position if he really wanted to. Tom Breuer, I mean, take your hats off for this one. It has been so far. We've not even seen the first time on the charts. I want to point this out. This lap has looked so good. I've already got it wrapped up on my mind that this is going to be a pole position. In through Ice Curver. Actually, no, Eschbach, sorry. Ice Curver is the one after. In towards Brunchen, then to Ice Curver. In towards Flansgarten 1 then. On the run towards Sprunghögel. Now, we saw slight issues for Bentley. We know things are relatively flat underneath the Nissans. Very easy, actually, at this track for them to get caught over the front aero on the more open sections there, like Flugplatz, and as we just saw there through Sprunghögel. But fortunately for Breuer, no issues this time. Heading in towards Flansgarten 2 then, you can see he's just clipping every apex down to the millimeter here. It is so fine on the run in towards Schwalbenschwanz. This is a driver who has done his homework, and it was no surprises in his performance in GT4, but really this is one step above it all. Down through the Kleiner Karussell, a little bit of a hiccup for him there, and that's actually probably the first in this lap so far, to which we have seen that in towards Galgenkopf. And just to remark here, his fellow Nissan is just under 8 seconds away. And that's Mr. Scallops. I really do have it on the predictions here, sadly, with no data to go by. We have to sort of gun it by instinct, and I'm thinking Nissan could definitely look at the chances not only for pole position, but I'd also make a gander as saying that this could definitely be a Nissan 1-2 kind of track. The GTR has been a bit of an understated choice on most venues, and we saw a very limited performance in its time over on the NLRL Solo Multiclass Endurance Championship, but that which a driver by the name of Anton Pohl was able to take Nissan's first ever live victory here on TRTN in the GTR, and that was a very bizarre round indeed. I think we're on the bookings to potentially see history repeat itself here. Tom Breuer on what has been an exceptional opening lap then. He's left absolutely nothing to spare here, but let's see, after all things said and done, where does it stack him on the timing charts? Our baseline time is going to be one really quite out there, 8 minutes 13.152. Nearest to the line then comes Mr. Scallops in the 394. What can he do against the 159? Across the line he goes, and he's 6.3 seconds off the mark there. The 172 across the line, and Pascal Stoltz in the middle with Jaguar. So I might have to bite my tongue in the assumption it would be a Nissan 1-2 sweepstakes here. Jaguar in second place. Now, we do know of some drivers that often tune into our live streams here on Twitch, and also the videos over on YouTube available via the TRTN YouTube channel, that are using races like these as somewhat of a viability study for the XKG3. Now, I won't say who, but those of you who've been watching for some time will no doubt know who I'm talking about. And as we see here, stacked up against a grid of both old and new machines, Jaguar is not doing too bad at all. 6.2 seconds, and currently looking at the final margins, it's 105 thousandths between himself and Mr. Scallops in third place, Pascal Stoltz in second. Anthony Valorio makes fourth place there for Lexus ahead of Thomas Ferre with BMW, Stephen Sutton in sixth with Manuel Lamoth in seventh place. Nearest to the line at the moment is the 1-2-3 after our first run of flying laps. It's Alessandro Litti on his way down towards Bergwerk. He's one of two Ferraris in this race, the other one being Jorp Overbeek, who we saw last week compete with Porsche. Made a very lofty move down here at Arenberg, which was later clipped. And it was, had it been a move that he had landed, it would have been one of the best moves of round two of the championship. Now we find here the 284 behind the wheel of the Ferrari 296. Let's catch on board, though, with the furthest up towards the next run of flying laps here. 8 minutes left to go. So we are among those final chapters with a lot of drivers still out on track to start their extra flying lap. One such driver to have returned to the pits already for an early end to their qualifying is Pascal Stoltz. And it was a gamble worth making. He tried it with Maserati last week, and now he's tried it with Jaguar, and he finds himself currently eyeing up the front row at the best of times here. Now, bear in mind, with Mr. Scallop still out on track, he's going to be praying that 394 runs into some kind of issue here, because the margins between himself and Mr. Scallops are very, very, very short. 105 thousandths of a second. It would take even a slight smidgen of an improvement to put himself back up to second place and secure a Nissan 1-2. I think there are still plenty of drivers not to count out of this all. Among them is Anthony Valorio. And I'd also like to throw in there the car right in front of him, the 55 of Asahi Ota. Now, we've yet to see a time from Ota in this session, and I believe that was the same story running out of free practice. So this is going to be an exciting time for the 55. Of course, the Aston Martin regular turned BMW driver for this round of the Karussell Cup makes his way out of Flugplatz with Valorio in tow in 4th place. Now, to get a look further down the line for the margins between 4th and 5th, we're talking Anthony Valorio versus Thomas Ferre, 41 versus 84, Lexus versus BMW. And the margins right now sit at, looking at it here, 315 thousandths of a second. So very, very close. Maybe not to the same extent as we're seeing for Stoltz v Scallops in that argument of second place. And actually, as I say that, Stoltz has not called it quits. He does actually have enough time because, of course, one must consider that you don't have to do a full outlap of the Nordschleife. You just have to do an outlap of the GP Strecker. So it does give him enough time to do one more flying lap. And Pascal Stoltz, clearly a little bit more anxious than we are about the gap between himself and Mr. Scallops, is looking to open the margins up here. But Nissan has been on unmistakable form throughout this qualifying session so far, and that's been led head and shoulders above the rest by that lap by Tom Breuer. And it looks like the 159 is not yet satisfied. An 8 minutes 13.152 is nothing to scoff at, but we saw in free practice he was capable of the 8 minute 12 marker, a coveted accolade that we didn't even think we'd see in today's sessions. Now, conditions are looking more than favorable. Optimum track conditions, no imminent threat of rain, and 29 degrees on track, with about 22 degrees on ambient. So very nice, very sunny conditions here in Nürburgring. And in towards the final round of competition in the Karussell Cup, Tom Breuer is looking for the championship title of this miniature 3-round series. It's all about the satisfaction in it all. Bear in mind, he didn't compete in the M2s, but that drop round system saved his bacon as he found himself leading in a joint first heading into today after round 2 in his maiden victory with McLaren. Taking a look back through the last couple of weeks to give you an example as to what it's been so far, the M2 division was led by Matthew Copsey after a sudden spiral out for the 172 of Pascal Stoltz, who qualified from pole but crashed at Tiergarten in the opening lap of round 1. That 60-minute race ultimately went on to be won by Copsey in his first and current only win. That's put him in a joint first with Tom Breuer, who won in round 2 in the number 159 McLaren 570S. You've got to hand it to Nissan here. Now, looking back to it, they don't find anywhere near the benefit that Lexus, BMW, or Jaguar have. All of them find themselves hovering around that top 5, namely Jaguar and Lexus right now. The BMW of Fabian Hodek currently 9th without a time to his name so far. We'll see where that case lies towards the end of qualifying today. We do see most recent news is Pascal Stoltz is back into the pit lane, so that could really be the end of his qualifying endeavours, with Mr. Scallops currently making his way down towards the Karussell Carousel. We also saw Alessandro Litti across the line to 8th place there. You can see quite a far margin off of the nearest time, that being Manuel Lamarth in 7th. Those two separated by, looking at it there, 21 and a half seconds, not thousandths, 21 and a half seconds. That's really the margins we're dealing with there here in the Nordschleife. Back onto the subject just very quickly of the balance of performance. We now catch back on board with Ota and Valorio. They're on the exit of Karussell on their way up towards the Hohe Acht section of the track. You see here Lexus losing 18 kilos, BMW gaining 15. So a law of extremes for BMW as well. Their M6 is losing 40 kilos Jaguar losing 40 kilos as well. Now, in arguments as to who this is best going to benefit, look no further than Pascal Stolz. He's been able to put that XK in the top 3 right now. We don't know what the upper limits for performance are like for Fabian Hodek in the 822, with any hopes that he could find himself to a top 5 position. It's a far chance, with the M6 having far less support in the long run compared to the M4. It was quickly usurped as BMW's de facto GT car. Nearest to the line at the moment, we catch on board with the BMW M4 of James Mason. So we'll see here the 3rd time from BMW after Thomas Ferre and Manuel Lamoff, 5th and 7th at this time. Let's see what Mason can do then. Out through Tiergarten, 2 minutes 25 seconds left to go, and he collides with a wall right on the exit of Tiergarten. A tiny bit of understeer led to a domino effect as he passes up Luca Tamburini. Mason to the line. He finds himself in 2nd place there. Real improvement. Had it not been for that slight knock, he would have found himself maybe eyeing up the high 4-second margin between himself and Tom Breuer. But that is a real turnaround for James Mason. Of course, he finished in GT4 3rd place last week, so now finding himself even further up the margins in the podium positions for 2nd for the start of round 3 for 90 minutes of racing, an hour and a half to be total coming up in the next couple of minutes here. That is a real sign of improvement, but as we've just seen there, slammed shut on a time that I frankly don't think I am capable of describing with words. 8 minutes 10 seconds. But Tom Breuer, Mr. Scallops across the line, puts himself nearly 2 seconds up over James Mason for a Nissan 1-2. The 84 nearest to the line, Thomas Ferre with BMW. Now, we've seen the efforts by his fellow Beamers over the course of this qualifying session. He puts himself into the top 5 to make 2 of those top 5 positions occupied by BMW. Then across the line comes the 41. Can Anthony Valorio retake 5th? Yes, he can. Right at the very end of qualifying here, up the margins by just about 199 thousandths of a second between himself and the likes of Thomas Ferre. Actually, no, hang on. That is, looking at it here. Yes, it is 199 thousandths of a second. I'm not crazy. Nearest to the line, number 91, Manuel Lamoff, now being pushed further and further down through the top 10. What can Lamoff do here on his way to the line? The 91 looking for redemption. His nearest target, Stephen Sutton, about 3 seconds up the road in terms of times on the charts. Across the line goes Lamoff. It is an improvement, but as you can see at the very end of qualifying here, even though he has the times to do 1 more lap, the question therein remains is, can he find the willpower to do so in towards the Yokohama S's? He finds himself there, pulling to one side. Manuel Lamoff at the best of times, looking at 8th place. So nearest to the line at the moment is Fabian Hodek, and we finally get the opportunity to look once again at the ubiquitous sight of the BMW M6. It is very rare we get to see a car like the M6, moreover to be sharing the grid with such oddball selections as the Lexus RCF, the Bentley Continental, and the Nissan GTR, as well as the Jaguar XK GT3. It is definitely a bit of a wacky races scenario here in round 3 in the GT3 division of the Karussell Cup. We are curious to see here as he makes his way out through Hedvigshoek in towards the run of Eschbach and Brünchen. What can the 822 do in terms of qualifying performance? Now, his main targets as a top 10 start, but as you can see, he's flagging there, and just before the run in towards Brünchen proper, Fabian Hodek calls it quits on qualifying. It leaves only a handful of drivers still out on track with a point to prove. Among them is the 1, 2, 3 on track at the moment, that being Alessandro Litti, the number 284, also out on track at the moment. Joop Overbeek in the Ferrari 296. So 2 Ferraris, both Ferraris as a matter of fact, out on track at the moment. The 413 ran into trouble in his efforts to try and do 1 more flying lap. That puts James Mason at the best of times in 3rd at the end of today's session. The 172 of Pascal Stolz is still out on track with a fighting spirit here to put Jaguar on the podium for the start of round 3 of the season finale. The 813 also out on track as well. It's Luca Tamburini in the Porsche 911 992. He makes his way in towards, by looks of it here, the run to Kallenhard just out of Metzgerfeld. It is really quite the pairing, is it not? The Porsche 911 and the Nürburgring Nordschleife. I mean, looking back through history, it's nearly 80 years of the same design ethos, all the way back from its first ever model. The Porsche 911 is the epitome of if it's not broke, don't fix it. And it has been pretty much the same design ethic all the way as far back as the late 1940s in the genesis of the Porsche 901. It came out of the designs of the Porsche 356A. A long, long history that charts all the way back to the Second World War as it stands with what was originally the Volkswagen Beetle. So the whole joke that the Porsche 911 is a Volkswagen Beetle does have at least some basis in history, but it does take a few generations before you hit that mark full on. Fun fact as well, as one time I did actually end up researching this, it did strike me as quite a curiosity as to where the joke comes from. Now, as it stands, the Volkswagen Beetle was taken by Ferry Porsche and with a handful of engineers was extended, had its body removed, replaced with a lighter body, and the engine was extensively worked on to form the prototype models of the Porsche 356. That later went on to be evolved into the Porsche 901 and then later the Porsche 911. So at its core, in the same way that we evolved from monkeys, the Porsche 911 evolved from the Volkswagen Beetle. On his way to Stylestrecker, Tamburini still on the charge here in that 813. He's not alone in that assumption because the 172 is just up the road as well. That Jaguar of Pascal Stotz. And as I say that, through Karussell, he's into the pits. That's the end of his qualifying endeavours wholeheartedly. So that is a big, big shock there. At the best of times, he's 4th place alongside James Mason for the final grid of the Karussell Cup. More on that in due course. Currently, there's only 2 more cars left on the field. Jorp Overbeek in the 284 Ferrari 296, and as we saw earlier there, Luca Tamburini in the 813 Porsche 911. James Mason in our Twitch chat saying there he had P2 on the cards, very frustrated, was already on his way to 2 seconds up before Karussell. So sadly, that is one of the realities of the Nürburgring Nordschleife. With so many corners to master, you can see huge, huge improvements. Oh, big trouble there for Overbeek. That is quite an explosive end to his qualifying endeavours down at Tiergarten. Now, that is not the first time we have seen someone's endeavours go completely astray at the last hurdle. As to bring back up the memory still quite fresh in our minds from about a fortnight ago in the opening round of the Karussell Cup was Pascal Stotz's calamity opening lap, where it all came apart on what was a very solid opener in towards Tiergarten. All came apart at the seams. So the last driver on track at the moment, Luca Tamburini, right at the very end of qualifying. As it stands, though, it's a Nissan 1-2 at a very, very rare time to say that. Bear in mind, this is still quite a competitive grid there. Oh, my word. Did you see that up off all 4 wheels? Tamburini in flight on his way to Flansgarten 2. Whilst we have the opportunity as well, let's actually take a look at those timetables. We did say we wanted to see what the free practice times were concerned with right at the very end of free practice. There are your free practice times. Then we look at qualifying so far. Tom Breuer and Mr. Scallops atop the timing charts in a Nissan 1-2. It's definitely going to make for one of the most bizarre opening grids I think I've ever seen in a GT race. Right now, we're still watching with Luca Tamburini, sole survivor here of the Nürburgring Nordschleife and all of its wrath. The 813, the last of the guard here, down towards the line. Down through Dottinger. In towards Tiergarten there, where we saw issues for Jorp Overbeek. Are we going to see the same story for Luca Tamburini? Argentinian driver brings it to a very short stop there. Little touch of oversteer out through Tiergarten down towards the line. What is it going to be for the 813 Porsche of Luca Tamburini down towards the line then at the end of qualifying here in the final quali session of the Karussell Cup? It's 10th place for Luca Tamburini. A great hustle there by Porsche to get into the top 10. Their solo Porsche entry after it was quite a popular choice back in round 2 in the GT4 wing. The last of the Porsches in 10th. So what an end to qualifying. We have one article of news to discuss before the grid today, but taking a look at some of the highlights of it there, I mean, it was real poetry in motion by Tom Breuer. He had one hell of an opening lap and he followed it up with an absolute showstopper in 8 minutes 10.920. Now, predictions, even though we weren't able to get them up on screen, we were taking a look through some of the raw data. Some of the fastest times we were seeing in the session was 8 minutes 12. So if you thought the margin was high, think again, because completely redefining what constitutes a pole lap here in the Karussell Cup has been Tom Breuer today, and following on a very close and hot act there, the 394 of Mr. Scallops makes a Nissan 1-2, an incredibly rare sight in any series for that matter. That's going to make for quite the set piece for the start of the final round of the Karussell Cup. James Mason makes a very solid third place start for BMW alongside what is definitely a bizarre matchup. The Jaguar XK-G3 of Pascal Stoltz in 4th and Anthony Valorio right behind him in the Lexus RCF. We'll get a full look at that grid in due course. 3 times unable to make their way to the charts. Asahi Ota, Fabian Hodek and Joop Overbeek. So a bit of a shocker there for Ota. We did think the chances were there to put that BMW into the top 10, but he misses out on his chances. He'll be starting in plumb last there. 15th place for the Japanese talent, formerly driving for Aston Martin. So, whilst we wait for the grid to form up, our single article of news has been quite an exciting one for those of you interested in the World Rally Championship. Our only article of news for this round of the Karussell Cup is that Johan Rossell and Nikolai Gryazin have both been signed to Lancia. Johan Rossell, of course, former driver for Citroën, I should say, and Nikolai Gryazin, a former driver for Skoda. The 2 of the most competitive names in the WRC2 Championship have now been signed to the Ypsilon Rally 2 ahead of its debut at the 94th running of the Rally Monte Carlo at the start of the 2026 World Rally Championship. It has been a real showstopper set of news, and what I'm personally thinking is how much money does Stellantis have to throw at the Ypsilon project to sign 2 of the most competitive names in Rally 2. Rossell was a championship runner-up last season to Oliver Solberg. Gryazin has been a present figure in almost every competition fight for the last couple of seasons. He's been a very, very competent driver with Skoda. Both of them being signed to Lancia makes for a fantastic set of news, and it's going to be very exciting to watch the Monte Carlo Rally later on in 2026 and seeing exactly where the Ypsilon gets off to its start. Of course, this could be the paving way to Lancia's return to top-of-the-line rally. Now, I do have to update one set of regulations we spoke about earlier on today, looking back to it. Now, the one mandatory pit stop there is not the whole case. I have just been updated on the fact that it is, as a matter of fact, 2 mandatory pit stops, as now you can see there. So I wasn't aware of that one. They didn't inform us of that ahead of time. 30 seconds. And as you can see, this is the grid right now, 30 seconds to the line. Tom Breuer from pole position. Mr. Scallops in second for a Nissan 1-2 start. James Mason third with Pascal Stoltz in 4th. Anthony Valorio in 5th with Thomas Ferre in 6th. Stephen Sutton 7th. Manuel Lamoth in 8th. Tom Wells 9th with Luca Tamburini in 10th. Alexander Kruger in 11th with Alessandro Litti in 12th. Fabian Hodek 13th. Joop Overbeek in 14th. And Asahi Ota in 15th place. This is going to be quite an exciting end to what has been a very short-lived championship here in the High Caliber Community League Karussell Cup. The GT3 category about to get lively here at the Nürburgring. One final dash here before the end of this 3-parter series. Of course, to remind you of where we're at, here is the calendar, of course. We've seen M2s, we've seen GT4s, and today, December 13th, we'll see 90 minutes of action from the GT3s. 2 mandatory pit stops as opposed to 1 in a most recent update. Timers getting ready there for 1 hour and 30 minutes of racing to follow. As we see leading the charge then from the land of the rising sun, the Nissan GTR R35. 3.8 litres, 6 cylinders, 2 turbos, and absolutely iconic status. 2 of them, no less, leading the charge down towards turn 1. This is going to be quite an exciting one, folks, and it can go any which way here. All bets are off, and it's all for the championship here for Thomas Ferre. It's his championship to lose in the Karussell Cup, but who wins in the GT3 division? Well, we're about to find out then. 15 cars in all, 7 one side and 8 on the other. Down towards the line for the final round of the HCCL Karussell Cup. From the line, Tom Breuer and Mr. Scallops. Without further ado, 90 minutes against the clock here in the green hell. The GT3 is about to get underway. After 3 weeks of racing, we're green and racing in the GT3 division. A great start then from the front row. Immediately looking to cover off there from an advance by James Mason. Looks to be Tom Breuer, who I must say, Mason has had an exceptional start there. Starting further down from the 2 Nissans. He's trying around the outside, following him up the inside, and it was contact from behind. I did just see that in my rear view mirror. Contact between Stoltz and Mason down through turn 1. Stoltz down to 3rd. We can see Ferre right behind Stoltz, but having missed out massively on the start there, turned around by Pascal Stoltz. James Mason in the 413, now up the inside on Alessandro Litti, elbows out on that 123. Following from behind him is Asahi Ota, as we can just see over the rear view of Mason. That has been quite a controversial start to kick things off then on that final round of the Karussell Cup. Mason has got his work set out for him. Tom Breuer ahead of Mr. Scallops, Pascal Stoltz 3rd, Thomas Ferre 4th, Tom Wells in 5th, if my memory is not mistaking me here. That Bentley has had a real start in the hands of the number 12. The timing chart's having a little bit of a moment to update as all things start to set into place here. We watch here with Steven Sutton caught in the middle of Hodek and Tamburini. Just up the road there, you can see eclipsed by that Porsche as the Lexus of Anthony Valorio in what looks to be 6th place. Looking back briefly on board here with James Mason, he now gets alongside, that's Alexander Kruger. Now at the inside and takes it. Round the outside, actually, as it stands on his way in towards the Vidal chicane. Alessandro Litti nearly collides there with Asahi Ota. Your Overbeek really getting his elbows out for track limits on a run in towards the Nordschleife for the first time over Kruger. See those two pressing each other down the line there for what I still can't verify his position yet, because the timing charts are having a real fit getting adjusted to this grid. Looking up the line, I want to get a look with this, as there is quite the sizable wad of traffic here. On with Fabian Hodek. You can see up the line as we head in towards Hatzenbach. Up the road from him, Sutton, Valorio, Tamburini, and Ferre, as well as Wells. The 507 in trouble there down the line. Was, I believe, taking a look down the order. The 507, if that's... yes, that is Kruger. It's Alexander Kruger in trouble with McLaren. So that's 2 drivers already found in the course of some kind of bother over the course of the opening lap of this race. First it was James Mason, now it's Kruger. We see here Tom Wells versus Luca Tamburini. Now this is quite a bizarre matchup. We've spoken quite a lot in the last couple of weeks about some odd matchups in one-on-one situations, and we've seen quite a few oddball matchups. I think very rarely have we seen one quite like this. Bentley versus Porsche versus Lexus, if you want to make it Three's Company here. Thomas Ferre disappearing up the order with Pascal Stoltz in 3rd, Mr. Scallop 2nd, and Tom Breuer leading the charge in towards Abnauer. That has definitely been a very bizarre start indeed. But Tom Wells, though, he's grinning ear to ear. He's in the top 5. That's just a powerful position to play for. So early on in this race. Not even 1 lap covered. With Tamburini hounding to get the position off of him, he's got him in the palm of his hand here, knowing the Porsche is a very easy car to overcook in stressful situations. It is not kind on its tyres, even when it's in the active process of tyre saving. The Bentley, I will say, is not much better, but since he's got the more powerful position here, a little bit more cleaner air, a little bit colder air, actually, as it stands, as he's far out of the slipstream of Thomas Ferre up in front, 1.4 seconds as they make their way in towards Kallenhardt. Tom Wells does have a very sizable stake of the field to play with. I want to get a look in and amongst this train of cars, because as we see lining up at the back of it there, that's James Mason. You can see up the line from him is a real wad of cars. You can see not far up the road the distant orange and white there of the Bentley Continental, that is Tom Wells. Then behind him, Luca Tamburini, Anthony Valorio, Steven Sutton, and then just in front of James Mason here, that's Fabian Hodek. So it's BMW versus Ford versus Lexus versus Porsche versus Bentley. Makes sense of that. Two generations of BMW GT racer going head-to-head here. M6 versus M4. In terms of straight line speed, the V8's got him pitched, but bear in mind, he's hitched himself on to that 5.4 litre V8 in front of him. That is Steven Sutton's Ford Mustang on our way down towards Bergwerk. Much better send of the corner here. James Mason looking to get it side by side up the inside for the run through Kesselchen on the 822 of Fabian Hodek. Now, bear in mind for Mason, this currently stands in the fight for 9th place on the grid. We're still on board with the 413. He was turned around in the Yokohama S's by Pascal Soltz. It was a huge snap there through Kesselchen in towards Mutkerver. Further up the road, you can still see that fight going on. Now between what looks to be Valorio and Tamburini, as Valorio overtakes the Porsche in his efforts to catch up towards Tom Wells in that Bentley Continental. In towards Klostertal. Further down the line, look to be some troubles there, I think, again for the 507. We did have a temporary white flag down in the sector behind, with the 413 still watching for that fight of 9th place. You can see it's just a whole swarm of cars up in front of him there, heading down towards Karussell for the first time. And this is really quite a sight to behold, following each other so close on margins there, rocketing out of Karussell. The two BMWs still at the focal point, but let's get a look right up in front there. Fabian Hodek is now practically pushing Steven Sutton in towards Hohe Acht. Oh, off in the background there. That's a Sahiota. We just caught the 55, spun around on the exit of the Karussell, facing the wrong way. What is the 55 going to do here to try and get himself turned around? Poor Ota, he's struggling to get the car in motion there. Has to wait for Alexander Kruger to get him on by. For Sahiota, things are not looking good here for that 55. We'll catch up with him in due course. We now look on board here with Steven Sutton, who I'm also told is in a spot of bother. And you can see down the line, he's also caught up the likes of Manuel Lamoff. There, you can see, is where the problems occurred. This was down through, I think, looking at it here, just the exit of Hedvigshöhe in towards Eschbach. So the number 7 in trouble. We see up the road there as well. The number 123 now also in trouble. That's Alessandro Litti with Ferrari on his way in towards Brünchen as it stands. This has been a disastrous start for quite a few drivers here. Steven Sutton could be out of this race before it's even had the chances to begin. The number 7 is already in the pit lane. We look back on board with the state of affairs going on here on our way down towards Flansgarten's Fire. The number 41 of Anthony Valorio currently being pursued by Luca Tamburini. Tom Wells up the road with Thomas Ferre in the top 5 right now. I believe that is going to be set to adjust again, because I think, if memory serves correctly, Tom Wells was 5th. The only reason we've been shoved down a position is because the number 7 is in the pit lane. So take of it at face value, this is actually the fight. Right now, we're looking at here for 6th place for Valorio. Valorio is 6th, Tamburini 7th, Hodek in 8th, Mason in 9th. See here, for the look of things from Luca Tamburini's point of view, he is really caught between a rock and a hard place, and things could only get worse for him. Porsche don't have the best for straight line speed, so they'll be religiously committed to staying in the slipstream of these two titans up in front, side by side between Valorio and Wells. This is for 5th place on the field right now. You can see actually emerging alongside them. There's Fabian Hodek's M6, now looking to get up and around him. Down the line there, you can see there's the M4. Luca Tamburini is caught like a deer in the headlights here. That Porsche just can't do anything. Up against Bentley, up against Lexus, and up against BMW. Tom Wells lost 2 positions over the course of one running of the Dottinger Hohe. It has not been a great start for him. He had a brilliant opening half, and that second half he's lost 2 positions out. The Bentley, we did say, was a bit of a dark horse for straight line speed, and it's because it's a make or break situation. It's widely dependent on setup. And we see right now with a less than ideal run out of Tiergarten, he's actually found himself susceptible to an onslaught here from the 813. This is all in contention right now as it stands, as we now pass up Steven Sutton. This is for 7th place on the grid. Luca Tamburini looking up the inside. Can he make the move stick over Tom Wells? The two are side by side. Wells will be back to the inside on the second part of the Yokohama S's, forcing the 813 to run all the way around the outside, but up the inside, 2 positions to what looks to be the price of 1 there. James Mason is back in the fight. I don't believe the likes here. Mason now looking for his chances. It forces the fight away from Luca Tamburini, and it's contact between Mason and Wells down towards the Ford curve. More trouble on the way. Collision down at the Ford curve on the first official lap. What is going on here in the Nordschleife? I tell you, it has been a bloodbath. Kruger v Litti in the fight of 11th place. They're down towards the Yokohama S's. The 123 versus the 507 on the exit of the Yokohamas in the RTL now on the run down towards the Ford curve. Earlier on the brakes there, hesitance by Kruger, trying to play things safe here over Litti. We'll catch up with these two later on. Tom Breuer now 5.5 seconds up the road from Mr. Scallops in second place. You see here for James Mason, he's been on a real fight back so far. Finds himself in 7th place right now. Fabian Hodek and Anthony Valorio next in his iron sights, but he's already having to shake off another target here. Luca Tamburini, who has really been quite the stern customer throughout that first flying lap. Now, as we are technically into lap 1, lap 0 gave Tamburini, like several drivers on the grid, a real fighting chance in a chaotic opening to round 3. In the pit lane there, we can start to tally up some of the damages here. The number 91, Manuel Lamoth, was caught up in that incident down just before Eschbach. That was with the number 7 of Stephen Sutton, who I'm told is also back out on track at this time. Manuel Lamoth has taken his first voluntary, or first mandatory, I should say, pit stop. That's one of 2. He's already halfway to clearing himself for the checkered flag. See here for Thomas Ferre, he's starting to look a little bit vulnerable in the way of things with Anthony Valorio and Fabian Hodek closing distance on him. The 41 and the 822 in pursuit of the M4, currently holding on to 4th place. We see here more trouble for the 507 and the 123, this time in towards Hatzenbach. That was an incident between Kruger and Litti, if memory serves correctly there. You see here, Jorp Overbeek looking to try his chances on Luca Tamburini. They're on the way through Cottonborn as it stands. You can see he's got the run here, so he'll be around the outside for Schwedenkreuz. Does Tamburini back out? We look over the rear view to see what the toll is, but no, Tamburini holds long there, was up the inside, went super late on the brakes, and holds on to it through Auenberg and Polstrasse. Wonderful stuff there by almost I said Alessandro Litti. He's down at 11th by Luca Tamburini in 8th place. In towards Adenauer Forest, Overbeek has got his work set out for him here, fighting against that 813. This is all for 8th place at the moment. A little bit of dust kicked up in their eyes could indicate some issues further up the line from Mason and Hodek and Valorio up for that fight of top 5. We'll catch on with these two in due course. We see here with the 41, who has been able to close a rapid rate of distance down on the 84 of Thomas Ferre. This could be the fight for 4th place we've been waiting for here for Anthony Valorio. And in pursuit of him is Fabian Hodek. I must say, it's been an exceptional performance out of these two. These V8 juggernauts were unlikely choices coming into round 3, but they have really had quite an outing here. But this seems to be a grid still in large part controlled by Nissan. A 1-2 still running at the moment for Breuer and Scallops. Stoltz 3rd with Jaguar. Right now, though, we're looking at the chances for a fight of... what's gone on there? What has gone on there? Do have to bear with me a second here, folks. I think there's been some kind of problem for Thomas Ferre. Yes. Oh, my goodness. That's... We're just double-checking all of our information here. Yes, that was a disconnect for Thomas Ferre. So, 4th place achieved, I suppose, then, for Anthony Valorio. Now he has to focus his efforts on, do I defend from Fabian Hodek, or do I keep trying to keep the foot down here and start building the distance up towards Pascal Stoltz? There is the chance here in the next hour and 16 minutes for Valorio to see a podium finish with Lexus. It could be an all-Japanese podium with Lexus and Nissan. I think that might actually be a first here on TRTN, if that is to be the case right now. Right now, it's Nissan Jaguar for the podium. Even then, we are still treading on the grounds here of firsts in TRTN history to see Jaguar in an actual GT3 race, so not an exclusive class like we have in the GT3 Revival Series by Competizione Performance League. It is going to be the first time Jaguar finds their way to an outright podium in a GT3 race. That's going to be quite an exciting one to see. Down through Karussell, then Valorio from Hodek. This is all for 4th place at the moment. It was previously in the pursuits of 4th place over Thomas Ferre, who, so I'm told, has disconnected from this race. So now it's actually in a defensive fight for 4th place for the 41. They make their way through Hoa 8 in towards Hedvigshoa. I must say, Hodek, for such a bizarre choice, has actually been able to put that M6 in rather competitive stead throughout this race so far. We're about 15 minutes in and getting a look at where things stand after a very chaotic opening quarter hour. We find Tom Breuer leading outright, now nearly 10 seconds up the road from Mr. Scallops. Bear in mind, the last time we observed this interval, it was half of that distance. Pascal Stoltz in 3rd, not far away from the other Nissan, the 394 of Scallops. Stoltz 3rd, Valorio 4th. We see here, we've been watching some time now with the number 41. Hodek in 5th. Mason into the pit lane and out of this race. So there's another DNF. The 413 of James Mason, sadly, is out of round 3 of the Karussell Cup. That leaves Job Overbeek to inherit 6th place. Luca Tamburini up to 7th. Tom Wells, after his incident with Mason down at the Ford curve, now re-inherits another position to 8th place. Alessandro Litti to 9th, and Asahi Ota in 10th place. You can see that potential for a fight at the moment between these two for 9th place coming up in a moment's time. They make their way in towards, by looks of it here, in towards Hedvigshoa on the run out through Vipperman in a moment's time. Alexander Kruger in 11th place at this time as well. He's ahead of Thomas Ferre, who's just reconnected to the lobby, so I'm told. As we do see him on the charts there, I think he might have actually just left from 12th place. So that would be 12th for Manuel Lamoff and 13th for Stephen Sutton. See here on to the Dottinger. Jaguar out by its lonesome here. It's been a very familiar sight and sound for the last couple of weeks on TRTN. It's still very, very jarring to see it actually stand 10 toes on business here alongside its contemporaries in GT3. And you can actually see the physical gap that divides Mr. Scallops from Pascal Stoltz. The chances therein remain right now for a potential fight of 2nd place if Stoltz is able to knuckle down here. And it is going to be arguably, we talked a lot about matchups, but this might be the most bizarre. Nissan versus Jaguar. Wrap your head around that one. We see here for Valorio, he's actually lost out position to Fabian Hodek. And I think we spoke a lot about Bentley being the dark horse for straight line speed, but I don't think anyone was considering the M6 from BMW to be part of this equation here, as it's very rare in any occasion that Lexus is outpaced in a straight line. I would still say, in terms of straight line demons, we are still looking in the direction of Ford and BMW. But I am pleasantly surprised to see how fast that M6 has been on what is effectively its first ever competitive debut here on TRTN. And even though it may be in the mini-series that is the Karussell Cup and not in a full championship, we can see that Fabian Hodek has not diminished his fighting spirit at all for the sake of the circumstances around him. He has been treating this like a thoroughbred endurance race. He has not been wasting any time here. And in his efforts to get up and ahead of Anthony Valorio, he's opened the taps up through the Yokohamas in towards the Ford curve. He's nearly a second up. Looking out back for where our nearest fights are concerned. Now, we were observing for some time the potential for a fight between Asahi Ota and Alessandro Litti that has now upgraded itself to the last of those top 10 positions. So we do catch on board right as it looks to come to a head here between the 55 and the 123. We're on board with Asahi Ota. Now, bear in mind, all of this right now for 10th place. Making his way out of Tiergarten, the 123 in sight here. In the pit lane at the moment is Kruger in the 507, as well as Sutton. And by looks of it there as well, reconnecting to the session looks to be Thomas Ferre. Side by side then, Ota will be to the outside for the start of the Yokohamas, then to the inside. So he is playing for the long game here, allowing Litti up what is effectively the inside of that first curve. And then he'll be to the inside again. He's forcing that 1-2-3 to try and run out wide, making him a bit more vulnerable for that mini straight that is the RTL down towards the Ford curve. But ultimately, the Ferrari's just got enough punch in the lower gears to keep himself up the road. So against the BMW, this has been quite an even matchup between the M4 and the 296. Ota has got his hands full here with Litti. The exit of Ford in towards the Dunlop curve here in the GP Strecke. Meanwhile, the 159 is already up through Hoheneichen in towards the Flugplatz. Still watching with Ota v Litti here. They've been very evenly matched here. The battle on 6 cylinders. V6 versus inline 6. Ferrari versus BMW. They're on their way just out through the Hatzenbechsborgen in towards the Wiedol chicane. In towards Hatzenbach at the start of the Nordschleife section. Now this is where they're going to be forced again to run front from back. Very little side-by-side opportunities coming up until we get onto the straightaways up past the Hoheneichen in towards Flugplatz, then out of Flugplatz into Kottenborn and the Schwedenkreuz. So catch on with these two in due course. They're about to go for a ride down through the opening sector of the Nordschleife. We catch up with our drivers already on the Nordschleife here, as now in the fight between Hodek and Valorio, Hodek has opened the gaps up to nearly 2 whole seconds over the Lexus. So the M6 has been a bit of an unsung hero in this race. I would still say it's been overshadowed by what Jaguar and Nissan have been able to do, but let's not count this out. It's been a real day for the oddballs. All top 5 positions are occupied by less than normal cars in terms of vehicle choice. You've got Nissans, you've got Jaguars, you've got M6s, and you've got Lexuses. I mean, that is a real odd ensemble on a sport that is often dominated by BMW's M4, by Ferrari's 296, by McLaren's 720S Evo, and I would even say in some small part as well by Mercedes / Aston Martin with the AMG GT and the Vantage. It is very bizarre then to wrap one's head around the idea that not only is Nissan leading, it has a 1-2 rolling formation at the moment with nearly half an hour covered of this race. Jaguar is on track for a podium. BMW with the older M6 is outgunning all of the M4s on the grid. Lexus is in the top 5. And that's before we even get to anything remotely conventional. As we look down the line, actually, for Jorp Overbeek and Luca Tamburini, just outside of that top 5. There's our first conventional cars, the 296 and the 911 992. They're 6th and 7th. Tom Wells in a Bentley in the top 10 in 8th. Bear in mind, he was on chances here for a podium himself. We get on board with Wells. Then you have Alessandro Litti 9th with Asahi Ota in 10th. And speaking of Litti and Ota, we catch back on with them. They're run through Metzgerfeld on the run in towards Kallenhardt. So I will say for Alessandro Litti, he's been no pushover in his fight for 9th place. Asahi Ota has really had his work cut out for him in his efforts to get around that 1-2-3. He's put on a very admirable defense of things before either of them have taken the notion of their first mandatory pit stop of 2. This might be the opportunity here for Asahi Ota. He's going to have to lick the stamp and send it. This could get it could get very ugly, I should say, between these two. I was about to say it's going to get nasty and then went for ugly, so it could have got nuggly, whatever that means. New word, nasty and ugly. Fortunately, though, there was no brazen contact between the two. In towards the Artifact Breitscheid, there could be another opportunity here. We've seen that Alessandro Litti is struggling for cornering capacity, and that which Asahi Ota has been able to take advantage of. And you can maybe chalk this up to just some lack of confidence with the Ferrari. Now, we've seen Litti before here on HCCL, but that was down in the GT4 Challenge. So on their way in towards Bergwerk here, trying for around the outside, perhaps for a super late apex of things. Asahi Ota is looking to run the full 9 yards here onto the straightaway section into the run towards Kesselchen and Mutzkurve. See here, Litti almost swerving around the road, trying to find any available space, but Asahi Ota can't make head or tail of it. This is a bit of a perplexing show here. He's not sticking to any one line. It's making it very tough for him to get around. Now, I don't think this is on the level that constitutes an investigation over whether or not he's swerving, because it's very minor movements to the left or right here. You can see it's a very bizarre line, and out through Klostertal very nearly was rear-ended by Asahi Ota. He gets up and around him before Stylestrecker, so it's a bit of a bizarre one. Very, very bizarre indeed. Nonetheless, though, Asahi Ota up to 9th. We do just see, I think there was a little bit of trouble down the line there for Alessandro Litti. He's now down nearly 4 seconds. What's gone on there for Litti? Is he out of fuel? Oh, don't tell me he's out of fuel. What's gone on there for Alessandro Litti? The car has fuel. We can hear the engine running, but he's come to a complete dead stop after the Stylestrecker hairpin. So the yellow flags are out here. We don't yet know what's going on, as it's now been cleared away. as he's made his way back to the pit lane. I'm still not entirely clued in as to what's gone on there for Alessandro Litti, but that was very, very bizarre indeed. In towards Schwalbenschwanz in the Kleine Karussell, we see here with Jorp Overbeek. 9 seconds away from Anthony Valorio, 6 seconds away from Luca Tamburini. Speaking of Anthony Valorio, he's now 2 seconds down the line from Fabian Hodek. Well, I must say, it's put on a royal showing of things here. And I want to bring to your attention the gap now existing between Stoltz and Scallops. Now, it is closing down slowly but surely here. That Jaguar does actually possess the chances to fight for second place. Scallops has dropped behind by a factor of 17 seconds between himself and Tom Breuer, who still leads in this race. You see here for both of the remaining podium sitters, are we seeing perhaps the first run to the pit lane for either of them? Doesn't appear to be the case, both of them staying out. With a growing list of drivers in the pit lane, among them Alessandro Litti, Stephen Sutton and Thomas Ferre. Things are getting a bit dire here in the Nürburgring for the final run of the Karussell Cup. It was a very, very rough start for a lot of drivers. I wouldn't say maybe to the same extent as things were for the M2 division at the start of the championship. I'd say our real Goldilocks zone was round 2 for the GT4s. It's an area where a lot of drivers, especially in the HCCL crowd, do understand rather implicitly how they should behave. The GT4s definitely did give us quite a few action-packed micro battles all throughout that race, all 1 hour and 15 minutes of it. As we're nearly 30 minutes in to this 90-minute race here in round 3. Things have been a bit tepid, I'd say, for the GT3s. We have seen a few sprinklings of fighting here and there. I think one such great move was by that of James Mason. It was side-by-side battling 3 abreast on the exit here of the Yokohama, as we see here with Luca Tamburini. He's currently found himself almost in perfect stalemate to 6th and 8th. 7 seconds apiece there. The 813, slight lock up over the front right. He makes his way down through the Ford curve. Tamburini in a comfortable 7th place right now. Behind him is Tom Wells, who was caught out by James Mason. A collision between the two down here at the Ford curve. Looking around the field, it's a real tough one to call now. A lot of the battles that we were previously expecting to happen pretty soon have started to dissipate. A lot of drivers relegated to the pit lane. We see one fight that could still happen, and I still hold a lot of hope that it does happen, is the reignition of that fight inside the top 5 between Valorio and Hodek, the battle of the V8s, Lexus versus BMW. See there, a bit of sliding on his way towards the Hatzenbach. Very nearly made his way into the wall. Something is not right here for Hodek. See if we can catch on board from Valorio's point of view. Now, following on for what is currently the fight of 4th place, we're on board with Anthony Valorio. As heading into the Nordschleife, of course, we saw what looked a bit floundering, really, out of that BMW. You can see for the Lexus, something was definitely a lot slower on the exit of the Hoheneichen into the Kiedelbacher Hohe and up towards Flugplatz. Something was not 100% there for the Lexus. It was either caught up in a higher gear or something is going on with that engine. Not impossible for the engines to overheat here in the Nordschleife. We've seen it to happen before on very, very rare occasions on other tracks as well. But when you consider the drivers will be spending the greater majority of their time up towards the rev limiter, it wouldn't be much a shocker here, especially with how long they're going to be doing it in some sections of the track. And considering as well we have another hour and about a minute and a half left before the checkered flag, the chances are there that this could still overwhelm the cooling systems on these cars and lead to that floundering performance for the engine. Now, we still don't know 100% what happened to Alessandro Litti. I don't personally think it's overheating. I think it was either a fuel concern or he's been forced to retire on other technical grounds, because he came to a complete dead stop after Stylestrecker. Seemingly no explanation behind it. It's a very bizarre DNF to see. God, that sound. Just crank the volume up on your devices very quickly. Just listen to this. It is an absolute brute, that engine. 5.4 litre naturally aspirated V8 engine there, much too similar to the one used by Ford. However, this one was engineered by Lexus. One used by Ford was a co-opted project between Ford Performance, and M Sport, I think it was again. See, though, in his prospects to fight for 4th place, Valorio has dropped now 2 seconds again behind Hodek to now what is nearly a net tally of 3, nearly 4 seconds between these two over the course of the last sector and a half. Looking up the line, things are starting to draw near here. 5 litres versus 3.8. 6 cylinders and 2 turbos versus 8 cylinders and nothing else. Pascal Stoltz is catching up to Mr. Scallops. Now, it comes in waves here between these two, but you can see the gap between themselves is starting to fluctuate lower and lower every time. When we first started paying attention to this gap over the course of the opening laps of this race, it was about 3.6 seconds. And that was down the Dottinger Hohe, I should remind you as well. As we make our way in towards Mutkirche, it's 3 seconds. So it stands to reason here when we get to the Dottinger, unless anything is to happen untoward here of the 172. He's going to find himself closer and closer, and it's going to need to be the case here. Does Scallops consider strategy before he runs the risk of being intercepted by this Jaguar? Because in a straight line, these two are much closer to each other than you would see in a more night and day comparison between something like the M6 and the RCF, as evidence would have it. For Pascal Stoltz, though, he's definitely been one of the more notable drivers of this championship. He has gone with quite a few unorthodox picks of vehicle, and you've got to respect him for being a bit out there with his choices. Of course, M2s, no one had the choice. It was a single-make series, but then the moment he was given the volition to pick his own vehicle, he went to Maserati. And now today, he's gone with Jaguar. If I had my mind about it, if this was a 4-part championship and we had the GT4s, he'd probably be driving in the, I don't know, probably the KTM, I'd say. Mostly for its resemblance to the Batmobile. See here, out through Brunchen we go into Eiskurve. Up the road there you can see, not far away at the moment, but with a bit of a lackluster run past the Karussell. It's now 4.5 seconds, hanging just below that there between Stoltz and Scallops. So the chances for him to fight at this stage of the race is starting to fleet from him here. As we make our way through Sprunghoog, or the Jaguar might have to start considering strategy as his main point today over that Nissan. He could actually stand to reason here to perhaps gain the leg up over the 394 if strategy swings in his direction. So an early pit could be on the bookings here. So we do see the tally now drop down to only 12 cars on the grid, with, I believe, Stephen Sutton having left the session. So looking just over the half-hour mark into this race, we still have a bit more time before that halfway mark proper. I think we'd be looking at the 45-minute mark before we're dead on halfway through this race at the moment. Mr. Scallops in second place ahead of Pascal Stoltz, but leading this session by a landslide here. I really don't quite know how to describe just the breadth of the gap on display between the two Nissans. Tom Breuer is looking not only to go back-to-back for race wins in the Karussell Cup, he's also looking for, of the races he's competed, a 100% win rate and the Karussell Cup Championship title. So in his efforts to headhunt quite a few accolades, he's not wasted any time here. Into the pit lane goes Tom Breuer, the first of our pit lane runners inside of that top 5. Now, of course, we've seen mandatory pit stops already from Asahi Ota and Manuel Lamoth, though that could be argued it was under the ramifications that there was damage to their BMWs, more so than anything else. Breuer is in. Does Scallops follow? Question being answered there, yes. 394 in. Does Stoltz follow? Yes. Does Hodek follow? That's the real question here. Can the BMW force itself to extend onto another lap? We already saw things were a bit rough around the edges for Fabian Hodek over the course of the last lap just gone. Into the pits he goes. The answer, yes. Here comes the 822 in. Does Anthony Valorio follow suit here? Going into the pits? Yes, is also the case. Jorp Overbeek next towards the line. Does he stay out or does he go in? The answer, he stays out. So this is a bit of a shocker here. Jorp Overbeek upsets the balance of what was all 5 of the top 5 drivers in. He now stays out and gains 5 positions for the price of 1. Luca Tamburini next to the line. Does he come into the pit lane? Yes, by the looks of it there. Tom Wells not far from his position. Does he come into the pit lane? Yes, that being the answer as well. We're starting to get a bit of a pattern here. Now, I don't suspect here, with how far back they are at the moment, by the time they do get to the pit lane entry, that Lamoth or Ota will be considering their second mandatory pit stops at this time. As we see, Tom Breuer is already back out on track. Now, admittedly, he's lost position over Jorp Overbeek, but under strategy, he'll get that back in due course. 55.5 minutes left to go in this race. Big shake-ups in the pit lane, I should say. Merging for the pit lane, Scallops and Stoltz still in close proximity to one another, but with Scallops still ahead, no ground gained for the 172. Hopefully, on this next stint with new tyres, Pascal Stoltz could find the energy to get up towards that 394. We did see it was on the cards for Jaguar to be able to do this, but now 55 minutes will tell a different story. Hodek emerges from behind them there, currently 5th place, Valorio 6th, Tamburini looking at 7th. Wells in 8th. Still a fair distance from Lamoth and Ota, 9th and 10th at this time. Just dropped off of the Jacks there was the 813. Luca Tamburini on his way out. Tom Wells, there you can see also emerging from behind him. 15.5 seconds the margin right now between Jorp Overbeek and Tom Breuer. So looking for where the nearest fights on track are concerned with at the moment, I think we'd still be looking in the direction of Stoltz v Scallops, with the gap now between Hodek and Valorio up at 13 seconds. Let's see if we can get on board then with Jorp Overbeek. He currently leads in this race then, before strategy has had time to set in. He's played a bit of a gamble here in terms of staying out. He's got one whole extra lap of the Nordschleife, and that is no walk in the park as it stands. He has got quite the challenge, I should say, ahead of him. For Jorp Overbeek, he's going to stay out for lap 4. Likely, I'd say here, on most tracks, you could expect drivers, when they extend on strategy, to go maybe 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 laps before they consider their pit lane entry. We've seen drivers really overextend on the shorter tracks as well, but on a large track like this, where one lap constitutes a significant chunk of the race time in total, 8 minutes 23 was the best lap by Jorp Overbeek, and 8 minutes 24 was his last. And oh, hang on just a second here. We're going to have to cut back towards the 172. There is trouble, and it is for the 172. Pascal Stoltz in trouble out through the Hoheneichen. So that's big trouble there. It's dropped away almost in its entirety. His opportunities right now to fight with Mr. Scallops. There is notable nose cone damage there for Pascal Stoltz. Very nearly caught even more trouble through the Flugplatz with a bit of grass on his left-hand side. What it has done is drop the gap now to 7.5 seconds between himself and Fabian Hodek in the 822 BMW. That has come as quite a shock there. We also see a very close gap nearby on the path to develop into a fight itself. Tamburini v Wells. We saw these two make their way out of the pit lane not long ago. It'll be Porsche versus Bentley if we are to see this fight for 7th place kick off in the next couple of minutes. Watch here with Tom Breuer. 14.5 seconds, so already reeling in the time over Jorp Overbeek. Speaking of Overbeek, we're back on board with him there. And as we're back on the conversation just before the 172 brought out the yellow flags down at the Hoheneichen, Overbeek is facing quite a significant challenge here. Of course, every lap constitutes a significant chunk of the racing time. So he's got a long distance to cover, 15.7 additional miles, before he can next take his run to the pit lane. And these are not 15.7 generous miles. This isn't the 15.7 miles you would take to drive to the next town over. You would take to drive to the supermarket. This is 15.7 miles of the most grueling extent of tarmac the world has ever known. It is a car killer, the Nürburgring Nordschleife. It did not earn its name, the Green Hell, by chance. It's not an affectionate title. It is a warning. So we'll stay on board with Overbeek. As of right now, leads by 12 seconds. We can observe that margin to our bottom left-hand side. That's the margin right now between Breuer, just behind him, And then behind Broy, you can also see the gap start to fluctuate for the 394, I should say, of Mr. Scallops. So still on with the 284, and you can see the margin in the time that we've been watching with your Pulverbeak has come down to nearly 10 seconds. So that really does go a long way to explain right now the gap between himself and Breuer, and also the pace difference between himself and Breuer. Looking on here with the Nissan now in second place after his first mandatory pit stop of 2, making his way out of Bunchen. He's in hot pursuit of Overbeek. Now, the chances for him to intercept that Ferrari before we get to the next available run into the pits isn't likely. But you can see he has done a long way. It's gone a long way, I should say, to bring the gap down to beneath 10 seconds. As we make our way towards the Sprunghügel, in towards Flansgartensfire, the chance still remains there for him to go beneath 10 seconds before we get towards the Schwalbenschwanz. Now, we'll catch up with that in due course. We do have an update from down in 9th place. Manuel Lamoff had a spot above there and now drops to 9th. Looking around the field then as to where our nearest fights are concerned, Stoltz v Hodek still remains as a chance here. 7 seconds between the Jag and the BMW. Bear in mind the BMW now on new tyres, not ones that we saw in his previous stint were definitely quite a bit cooked out. Definitely say a bit of a well done situation on those Pirellis. Whereas Stoltz is contending with nose cone damage. See here, this is your Overbeek once again, and the gap still just north of 10 seconds. You can actually see hovering off in the distance there, very faintly, is that, and it's lurking around in the shadows there. You can see just off in the distance was that of Tom Breuer. 10 seconds as we make our way through Antoniusbrücke and down towards Tiergarten. There it finally drops to just south of 10 seconds. In towards Tiergarten we go. This is the best time now for Joop Overbeek to make his way to the pit lane. We'll see whether or not for the Dutchman that is the case. Out through Tiergarten we go then. And there you can see anchoring himself in for a run to the right-hand side. Joop Overbeek into the pit lane. That'll give Tom Breuer premier access back to the race lead. Mr. Scallops, he'll be looking to return to second place. Pascal Stoltz looking to return to the podium. Now, something that has gotten me a little bit worried here is just in the case that obviously we've already had issues today in regards to driver disconnect. Looking at those ping indicators to the left of the manufacturer logos on your bottom left-hand side, you'll see that both Stoltz and Hodek are in the red. Now, we've seen before that drivers have entered races up to 6 hours long with this and have gone on to have absolutely no issues. They've operated perfectly fine under these circumstances. You can never be too certain. And that's always the fear I think a lot of these drivers have in the back of their mind. It already caught out Thomas Ferre, who now finds himself staring on from the pit lane in the 84. These two, with the chance still remaining to fight for a podium, they'll want every opportunity they can get, and they want it to feel deserved. They want it to feel gratifying, so a disconnect would throw all of that in the bin. Joop Overbeek then returns to the track and in 6th place there, now north of Luca Tamburini and Tom Wells. So a good first stint by Overbeek. He was able to take a prime advantage out of that hurry into the pit lane for a lot of drivers. He was able to surf the crowd, finds himself still up toward a chance of a top 5 if anything occurs up in front of him between either Stoltz, Hodek or Velorio. Speaking of Valorio, here he is at the back of the top 5, pursuing Fabian Hodek, but by a withering gap. Of course, we saw their overtake between the BMW and the Lexus. We saw the aftermath of it, I should say, and now 12 seconds up the road from Valorio. The chances still remain quite slim here for the Lexus to see 4th place ahead of that M6. Fabian Hodek, like Pascal Stoltz, have been 2 drivers to take a tremendous risk in terms of vehicle choice, but ones that seemingly have paid off. I would say it's been quite an understated decision by Mr. Scallops. I wasn't expecting a move over to Nissan, but he has took the risk alongside Tom Breuer, and both of them have seen the most advantage out of any 2 drivers in this race. Seems almost a match made in heaven then between Nissan and the Nürburgring. Manuel Lamoff is back into the pit lane then, the number 91 in for what looks to be his last mandatory pit stop as he drops into the back of the top 10.
We are halfway through. Keep it up.
You can see it's a bit of a sly tactic, but I can definitely see the 91 making his way back up through the order by some way by the end of this race. It's quite cheeky. He knows he can do 45 minutes of racing on that set of tyres. Now, it'll be a bit of a grueling experience in the last couple of laps, especially down to the checkered flag with time against you as opposed to with you here. But at the halfway mark of the race, as we've just seen ticked by, it's not the worst idea in the world to go for that second pit stop, to undercut your second stint by immediately jumping onto your third. It does give you that leg over everyone else because you'll be out where there is no traffic. You'll be in an area where you can keep the tyres nice and safe, nice and cool. You're not pushing the car too hard. Stick to your own pace, and the positions should, in theory at least, fall back in your favour. But again, these kind of strategies rely solely on a driver's consistency, and that can be quite flip-flop, and especially under pressure, I would say as well. It's quite the risk that Lamoff is taking, but we'll see whether or not it pays off in about 43 minutes time. Watching here with Tamburini v Wells, it's now 1.5 seconds, I should say, between the Porsche and the Bentley. The chances ever closer now for another fight on track, this time for 7th place between Tamburini and Wells. The 813 leading, the number 12 there just behind him attacking. We'll stay on board with Tom Wells. We follow him just out through towards Cottonbourne. We'll leave you on board with Tom Wells. We'll be back in just a moment's time as we are definitely looking now into the considerations of that fight for 7th place. So still on board with the fight of 7th place as it starts to draw away from Tom Wells. Luca Tamburini up 1.6 seconds now, drawing further away from the chances right away of a fight of 7th place. These two still among the closest together on track. We'll take a look around the rest of the field to see where the rest of the grid is concerned with. Of course, there was that slip up not too long ago between the 172 and an area in the midway of the Nordschleife. That did allow for the imminent arrival of Fabian Hodek. We now see the gap at about 4 seconds between the Jaguar and the BMW. These two still fighting for what remains of the podium. About 40 minutes left to go here in the Nürburgring for the final run of the Karussell Cup. It's down to the wire between Hodek and Stoltz on their chances for a podium. It will definitely be a very bizarre one as it stands between either the first ever Jaguar podium or the first ever M6 podium here on TRTN. So looking to cement themselves into the history books. Up through Brunchen we go then. Both of these drivers pushing it to the limit. Your Borverbeek is off by his lonesome in 6th place. Still a very confident position to find himself in over the course of this race so far. He's played quite well with the strategy. He definitely did take quite the risk in staying out ahead of Breuer. Ultimately dropped down to 6th place, but is still one incident away from being in the top 5. That is what he's got to start to consider here. It's consistency that's going to keep him in this fight. We've seen a lot of drivers come through the woodwork to dominate in the Nordschleife off consistency alone. And what we're seeing out of the 159 is not only consistent, but is consistently faster than everyone else. This is a driver who has absolutely done his homework with this track. Tom Breuer is no stranger to the Nordschleife, and this is possibly the most invigorated performance we've seen out of him in all of the times we've seen his appearances, whether it's been by himself or whether it's been alongside his compatriots of the NRW Performance team over on the NLRL Console Endurance Series. Tom Breuer has led this by a landslide so far, and the chances only stand for things to get better for him by the end of this race, and moreover the end of this season by contrast. 8 minutes 14.475 on the last lap just gone. We'll see what that is matched by Mr. Scallops. Now, his best time was 6 seconds slower than 8 minutes 20.060. The last lap of 9 minutes 16. That's, of course, when one considers that the last lap, of course, was factoring that pit stop as well. So down towards the line here, we see it is a much faster lap on the bookings here. 8 minutes, looking at it here, 18.870. Now, about 4 seconds off of Breuer, but a lot closer than what it has been traditionally. That's the fastest lap he's done so this race. That's a new personal best, I should say, for Mr. Scallops over the course of this race. Full airtime there for Asahi Ota. We catch back on board with him. He's off by his lonesome here, straddling the back of the top 10 now. For Asahi Ota, one must consider he did start in 15th place. So this is all an improvement for him. 6 positions up to nothing to scoff at all. He's outlasted the rest of the grid that was up in front of him. But right now, of course, we know with Ota, he's quite the ambitious type, and he will be looking at a way to make his way up to 8th, perhaps even 7th place. The chances right now are just a little too slim to call it. It would take for an incident up the line between Wells and Tamburini to put Ota in that fighting chance for positions north of his own. 9th place right now, 6 positions up from the start, is nothing to scoff at all, and I'm sure it's a result he'd be happy to walk away with, especially when you consider looking back into the championship standings that he was at level pegging heading into round 3 with, if I'm not mistaken, was James Mason, who is now retired from this race. Looking these are the championship standings, Copsey with a no-show for this race is looking to lose the championship off to Breuer. Aragonese's in joint 3rd with Scallops. That'll be a definitive 3rd, perhaps even 2nd place for Scallops right now. Mason, of course, joint 5th with Ota. So Asahi Ota will be seeing a top 5 position. He could even, dare I say, be seeing 3rd place by the end of this round. He could be seeing 3rd in the championship just by where he's standing at the moment. He's outlasted all of the drivers to be up in that top 5 besides Breuer and Scallops. So the chances are absolutely still there. I would not count this out. This could still be a hopeful end to his championship hopes. Now, while it might not be the championship itself, I don't think anyone in their right mind right now, given the performance that he's had, is going to be able to take this one off of Tom Breuer. This looks like a clean sweep for the 159, but it could be a silver lining to what has been an otherwise dark cloud for the last 24 hours here for Asahi Ota. looking up the line. Now, this is the fight he was hoping would have kicked off by now, as Tamburini v Wells. I can actually see that it's now opened up to nearly 2 seconds between the Porsche and the Bentley. And you really got to hand it there to Tamburini to be able to keep that Porsche in such solid stead on a track almost designed with the express intent to kill it in the most violent and gruesome ways possible. To keep himself up the road from the Bentley, which by all intents and purposes is a bit of a juggernaut when it comes to anything involving undulation, when it involves curbs, when it involves basically any kind of obstacle smaller than, say, a large city, as it were, the Bentley can demolish in one fell swoop. It's a very stable car. It lacks for overall maneuverability. It makes up for in its staggeringly unshaken performance. Looking around the field here, we can see Ferre and Sutton. And we saw that, or at least the aftermath, I should say, of the incident. We didn't get to see the incident itself. We did see the knock-on effects of it for Stephen Sutton. This was out through Wipperman on his way down towards Eschbach and Brünchen, on his way in that middle and final sectors of the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Ultimately, that's brought a swift end to his race today. And as it stands right now, with Fabian Hodek joint 10th with him in the championship, Hodek will be moving up into that top 10 in the championship after this round today. It will end this season on a high note, because not only has it been a sensational race for him so far, with a chance for it to elevate even further. Looking at the gap here, 2.3 seconds between himself and Pascal Stolz. There could be a clash between these two. And oh, into the wall goes the 822. A tiny little stab there over the curbs, out through. That's Kallenhardt. Very nearly took him out of the race entirely. Now, that will add a bit of a knock to his confidence there, especially in that section for the rest of the race. And it has also given up 2 additional seconds up to Pascal Stolz. Now 4.3 seconds up the road as they make their way out through, by looks of it, their Exmüller. In towards the Ausfahrtbreitscheid, the Jaguar still holds command of 3rd place. I want to get on board here. Tamburini v Wells has actually closed in massively in favour of the Bentley, Tom Wells. We're finally back on board in this fight for 7th. Luca Tamburini defending. And where we have watched with Wells for some time, let's actually see if we can catch on with Tamburini. We just take a look to the car up ahead here, the Porsche number 813 of Luca Tamburini. He's having to weigh up his options right now in the defense of 7th place. I want to talk about sounds now. We mentioned that Lexus earlier on today, but I really do think what we're hearing, blessing our ears here, is the glorious, glorious sound of that flat 6 engine the Porsche 911 is so well known for. And through all of the meantime we've been watching with Tamburini here, he's opened the gaps up another 0.4 of a second from what was at its closest time. 1.3 is now 1.7 as we make our way in towards Mudkurve. Now this is quickly swinging back in favour of the Bentley that's got him pitched over straight line speed, but through Mudkurve in towards Stahlstrecke and Klostertal and Stahlstrecke if you want to go by order of appearance here. Through Klostertal in towards Stahlstrecke. Maneuverability is going to swing highly back in the favour of Tamburini. He knows cornering capacity is much more on Porsche's side of things than it is on Bentley's. So this opportunity now, heading out through Karussell, is where he's going to be able to open the gaps up, and he will need to open the gaps up north of 1.2 seconds because he is still very much so in the danger zone to being intercepted down the Dottinger. So starting things off here down at Karussell, 32 minutes left to go in this race. A heated exchange for 7th. And we'll take a look later down the line on what the concerns are right now for that fight of 3rd. The 172 is still dropping time to the 822 of Fabian Hodek. So the BMW could be seeing action against the Jaguar for 3rd place. But right now we're watching one of the most closest fights on the track. That being 1.8 seconds and closing between Tamburini and Wells. Now, Wales's fears are going to sit primarily on the risk of overextending, as we've seen already for the front engine cars. Yes, they've got the stability to tackle the Nürburgring. That's on the grounds that they can keep it away from the gravel and the grass, because you're really just a victim in that area. And we did see him run quite heavily over the gravel in through Brünchen, so he's going to be dropping a little bit of time here on his way towards Eiskurve. In towards Flansgarten 1. Tamburini with premier control right now of 7th place up through Sprunghügel. Oh, but he's off into the gravel. So trouble there for Tamburini. He's able to keep it just about onto the track, but he's lost a lot of time over Tom Wells. So his hopes to keep position right now are starting to wither, because now less than a second away, we're in through Flansgarten 2. These two rocketing out as Wells is forced to cut over the grass. I think that, yes, that is trouble for Tom Wells into the wall in the background. Oh my goodness. We saw the back end leap away from Wells. I think we should have cut to him there and then, because we knew what was coming next. And he did take quite the tank slapper against the wall. Tom Wells now 5 seconds down the road from Luca Tamburini. The Porsche can breathe a sigh of relief heading in towards Galgenkopf on the run to the Dottinger, because now he's got more than enough of a buffer zone between himself and the Bentley that would have ate him alive on the opening of the Dottinger. This back straight here is where the Bentley can really spread its wings, but since it's just too far away on the Porsche and has no available chance to capitalize on the slipstream, he's going to be seeing quite a far distance away that Porsche slowly reel in, but it's just too little too late. We are seeing up the road, though, moves into the pits for our second run of pit stops. Pascal Stolz into the pits. That gives Fabian Hodek temporary command of third. Anthony Valorio is in. That gives you Jorp Overbeek a chance to move up to fourth for the time being. For Luca Tamburini, he's next towards Tiergarten. So what is the running rates here for the 813 to make their way into the pits? With the way things were in a slightly ropier final section, the 813, there was no argument there. Luca Tamburini into the pit lane. Tom Wells stays out, though, so he's willing to go the extra yard here, knowing that it was a bit of a fluke that caught him by the backside in through Flansgarten 2. He knows he's got what it takes now that he doesn't have to compete with Tamburini for space on the track. He's got a clear line of sight ahead of him to extend for one more lap. Asahi Ota is nearest to the pit lane entry. We'll see what the running rates are for the 55, knowing if he comes into the pits now, he'll still be clear to continue inside of the top 10 ahead of Manuel Lamoth. Only 10 cars left in this race. It has been a bit of a dire situation. A lot of drivers caught out in this round. Started with 15 cars. We're down 5. 2 still in the pit lane at the moment, watching how this race plays out. That's Ferre and Sutton. In the meantime, Ota is in. That's 3 cars in the pit lane. Tom Wells extends the margins up to 6th place. And actually, as I say that, we see that Pascal Stolz emerges in only 4th place. So it really did go to show how far up the road that top 3 was. Hodek, by looks of it, into 3rd. Actually, we do need to double check. So no, there was just the update there. Stolz is down to 6th. So this is the one thing that I'm going to be honest, and just breaking a little bit of character here. This is the most frustrating part about working with ACC. How they can update the position markers once in a blue moon like that. It just looks silly. It just looks silly. Well, we now have the actual concise understanding of what's going on here. Jorp Overbeek in 4th, Tom Wells 5th, Pascal Stolz is not in 3rd. Like the game suggested, he is in 6th, ahead of Luca Tamburini. For Hodek and Overbeek and Wells, these are the ones looking to overextend on the margins here on their contemporaries, now down 6th, 7th and 8th place respectively. And something to note as well for the case of Tamburini. He does find himself out by his lonesome now. He was fighting with Wells. This is an effort now for the number 12 to try and undercut the 813, or I suppose overcut more relevantly. See here for Anthony Valorio, he finds himself stuck in the middle, really. 9th place, out past him there, 27.1 seconds down the road, and then 19.4 seconds up the road from him is 7th place, Luca Tamburini in the 813 Porsche. So he's in a bit of a lonely state of affairs this late on in the race. 26 minutes left to go before not only the end of round 3 in the GT3 division runnings of the Karussell Cup, but the end of the Karussell Cup in its entirety, but not the end of all the special events for HCCL. Like we mentioned, we'll be coming to you live tomorrow, same time as today, for the coverage of the 2.4 hours of Spa, the charity event for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. More information on that tomorrow and around the same time, 2 p.m. GMT, 9 a.m. Eastern. And whilst we've got the opportunity here, we'll stay on board with Pascal Stoltz, as we actually want to start talking about some of the drivers that have signed up for this race. Now, to give some synopsis on what the 2.4 hours of Spa is going to look like, of course, it's a 2.4 hour race. That's about 144 minutes we're looking at in total of racing time. And that is spread across two categories, GT3 and GT4. Let's just get a quick look at that as well. So, in terms of what to expect coming into tomorrow's charity race, we'll start things off with 20 minutes of free practice, 30 minutes of qualifying, and 144 minutes and 2 mandatory fuel and tyre stops of racing. Of course, all of it is an awareness and fundraising event for the St. Jude Children's Hospital. We'll have more information to hand on that tomorrow, as we do want to play our part here. Of course, we will be the official broadcaster of this event. But to get a look at some of the drivers expecting to be seen on tomorrow's grid. Now, having a look around the grid already, I'm seeing quite a few familiar names here. Anthony Valorio, Mr. Scallop, Steven Sutton, Gino Latorre. Looking further down the line here as well, Julio Bahena, Luca Tamburini, Rafael Bayer. Looking at it here as well, Felipe Silva, Will Taylor, Teo Monier-Chaplet, Mario Rodriguez, Nathan Corbett. Pascal Stoltz will be racing in tomorrow's race. He'll be racing in the same Jaguar. So you gotta hand it to him here. He is going the full 9 yards on this whole Jaguar thing. This isn't like a runaway bit. This is a proper commitment over this weekend for the 172 to compete with Jaguar. And if today's performance has been anything to go by, it could be quite an exciting race for him tomorrow. Oh, hang on just a moment. It seems that our timer has malfunctioned. Well, that's... Oh, I know why it did that. Silly me. Okay, do give me a moment here, folks. We'll get that timer back up and running, but I've just figured out why it did all of that. And that's actually given me quite a good reminder to maybe update my settings on my computer. I'll give a breakdown as to why that is the case. Give me one moment. Oh, that's gone horribly wrong there. Okay, we're just going to pull that away until we can figure out what's going on there. So, to give some synopsis as to what on earth you just experienced, it has been the case where our button to reset the timers, and this is something we do in troubleshooting pre-event, is the full stop button. It's we don't normally end up having to type anything during the race, so we didn't see this as much of an issue, but it is the 2.4 hour. So when we were Googling this, we ended up pressing that button and completely reset the timer. So that's our bad, you know, we'll own up to that, we'll confess to our problem, but that all should be resolved in about 5 seconds. So in the time that it took for me to explain this, we have now fixed the problem, and it's like it never happened. So, apologies for the slight technical interruption, but now we can continue the conversation once again on the grid. So, of course, we mentioned already a few names, and among them is Pascal Stoltz, who, like I said, is looking to commit full 9 yards here for this weekend to compete with Jaguar. We've seen a great performance out of him today, and he'll be competing tomorrow in the 2.4 hours of Spa in tomorrow's charity race. Some other names I'm recognizing here. Fabian Hodek will be competing with McLaren. We can also see Sullivan Di Amaro will be competing with Ferrari. And then we've got the GT4s, and there's a lot of drivers I recognize here right off the bat. Casey Miles, Fabiano Bartoletti, Tom Lawson, James Mason, Tom Wells, Matthias de Munster, Alberto Aragoneses, Liam Bello, Maxence Kalin. Who else have we got here? We had a driver we were supposed to see today, Gabin Itier. He'll be with the number 1 Porsche. Roman Zhdanov, Tom Breuer, Alejandro Gonzalez. Several names here that I do recognize right off the bat, so I am thoroughly looking forward to seeing how that race plays out tomorrow. Right now, though, we're just about 21, just under 22 minutes left to go in today's race. We are still yet to see what is the scope of things inside of the top 5. As I do say that, both the Nissans are in. That's Tom Breuer and Mr. Scallops. Will Fabian Hodek be following them into the pit lane? One does wonder. Here comes the 822 BMW on what looks to be a bit of nose damage there. And I think that was probably from earlier on when he did have a brief tank slapper. So the 822 is into the pit lane. That makes 3 cars. Now, Breuer, by the way, is already out of the pits. So in the scope that we've been talking about, a lot of drivers coming into the pits. By the time Hodek's in, Breuer's out. So that's the distance right now, just on the podium alone. Jorp Overbeek looks to be extending out again for this lap. Tom Wells not far from the line as well. We'll see whether or not he's coming into the pit lane, but focus point here on Pascal Stolz. Now, this is in the fight for what remains of the podium. Now, we know Mr. Scallops is likely to return to second place somewhere later down the line. Right now, Jorp Overbeek holds on to second by overextending on this stint. He'll be getting back into the pits probably on the next lap coming. He's done that sort of +1 strategy for the longest time. Right now, it has put him in closer stead of the top 5 by the end of this race. That is the objective right now for the Dutchman in the 284. Wells is in, so Stolz will be seeing, by looks of it here, 4th place, with Hodek still yet to have emerged. So on the strategy here, it looks like the 172 has done enough, because as we hear the thunderous roar, that 5-litre Jaguar V8 crossing the line, Hodek is still in the pits, and I believe this is some compounded repair jobs as well as fuel and tyres. So it's a slightly longer pit stop in the second running of things for Fabian Hodek. That could drop him down quite a few positions here. Stolz is already up past. Tamburini could be next to gain advantage over Hodek. We've still yet to see the 822 be cleared for release. And as we say that, there, dropping off the jacks, goes the 822. He's on the exit of the pit lane now, so he'll stay up the road from Luca Tamburini. We'll get a full update on those positions in the next couple of minutes. Really, what does remain as the one erroneous piece of the puzzle is Jorp Overbeek. Getting back on board. He's second place in this race now. On his previous stint, he used this to lead the race for some time, but over the course of that lap, he dropped quite a considerable chunk of time after Tom Breuer before he made his way to the pit lane. We'll see exactly what the strategy is coming forward for Overbeek this time around. I think he is still gunning for, because by the time he got into the pits for his first mandatory pit stop, he left it in 6th place. So his chances right now is to look for a top 5. That's the objective, I think, for the 284. And the question therein remains, after this lap just gone, where he's most likely now to come into the pits on the exit of this lap, will he be doing... well, will he have the chance, I should say, to make his way to the top 5? Pascal Stolz, he has more than absolutely opened the gaps up over Fabian Hodek with just under 19 minutes before the checkered flag. His line to the podium has sort of been paved there in gold for the Jaguar. Be excited to see where that unfolds for him in the next 18.5 minutes of racing. Well, Luca Tamburini, he finds himself still in close proximity to Tom Wells and not by large enough of a gap that he would like here. 6.2 seconds, that could absolutely drop away from him. As we saw towards the end of their fight, Tamburini was just able to escape an incident down at Flansgarten Svi where Tom Wells' back end kicked up and away from him, nearly put him head over heels on his way through Flansgarten Svi. Fortunately, he was able to keep the car running, but he was into the pits not far from that point to repair for damages. Manuel Lamoff, I should say, is in the pits as well. As we've also just seen Asahi Ota still inside of the top 10 here. Manuel Lamoff into the pits, actually missing his pit box. And you can see why he's come into the pits, because look at the scope of the damage over the nose there of the 91. Could that be the end of his race here? You can see it looks like both nose cone and steering damage from Manuel Lamoff's 91. He's into the pits, though, to take repairs on his car. He'll be in there for quite some time by the looks of it. As we're still on board with your Overbeek. Second place at the moment. Now, looking at where things stand in terms of the average time spent in the pits for these drivers. Now, this is upwards of just over a minute. So his margin right now is to clear Tamburini. Now, between himself and Tamburini exists a gap. Now, this is very, very rough maths, but it's about a minute and a half. So the chances are absolutely there to be up the road from Tamburini, to be in 5th place. But it is going to take quite the next lap here. Or the lap that he's currently on, I should say, for Overbeek to succeed on this. So just under a quarter of an hour left to go. Let's get a look at the scope of things in the final 15 minutes of racing. What has been a very mixed bag, I'd say, in this second half of round 3. Tom Breuer still leads decisively so, 159 up by over 25 seconds. It's 27.777 at the last interval between himself and Joop Overbeek in second place. Right now, the Dutchman extending on his second stint here by an extra lap to keep himself in the top 3. His chances right now, after his pit stop, is to try and aim for a position inside of the top 5. That is the current goal for the 284. The question therein remains, with the intervals starting to update, is that still on the cards here as we start to see things close in massively? Mr. Scallop's only 9.7 seconds away, so his gap in a grand total here between himself and the current target, which is to be ahead of Luca Tamburini, is starting to wane away from the 284. Further behind him, Mr. Scallops in 3rd and in pursuit on his way down towards the Schwalbenschwanz. Pascal Stolz in 4th place, set to return to the podium for Jaguar. Far away from him there after a much longer than expected pit stop to repair the nose cone damage he had. The 822 of Fabian Hodek with BMW. He's up the road from Luca Tamburini in 6th, Tom Wells in 7th, Anthony Valorio in 8th, Sahiota in 9th, and Manuel Lamoth in 10th place. Thomas Ferre and Stephen Sutton DNFs in this race, but watching on from the pit lane. As we drop into what is effectively the last 2 laps of competition here in the Nordschleife, we're seeing it here. One more lap after this one for Tom Breuer as he crosses the line onto the start of lap number 9. We'll see then, in towards Tiergarten. Is Overbeek looking at that +1 strategy again, heading in through Tiergarten down towards the entry for the pit lane? This is his first available opportunity. Does he stay out or does he head to the pit lane? It looks like he's doing the latter. The 284 is in. So now we see whether or not that extension by 1 lap has done him any favours in the long run. The target is to be in the top 5. We'll see if that's the case. Already getting up and past him. So down to 3rd goes Overbeek. Scallops now up to 2nd. Stolz not far from him. He's through Antonio Spucher and will be heading back towards the top 3 by the end of this race, heading in towards Tiergarten for Jaguar. Then about 30 seconds down the road from Stolz is Hodek in the 822 BMW M6. So Overbeek still in the pit lane, but serving his last mandatory pit stop, goes down to 4th. Stolz now up past him into 3rd. Hodek down through Antonio Spucher, down towards Tiergarten. Overbeek still yet to have been cleared off of his jacks here. 284 still in the pit lane. Here comes Hodek then on the exit of Antonio Spucher, the 822. Down towards the line. And we do see Overbeek is cleared, so this has been a remarkable turnaround. We see in the pit lane as well is Manuel Lamoth in the 91. This could be a retirement for the car, currently 10th place. Overbeek is out of the pits, and with Stolz already up into 3rd. Hodek in just right in front of him, I think, there. Yeah, the 284 emerges from the pit lane, actually, in the grand total of things, in looking at it here, 5th place. So the achievement, or the target I should say, of getting up towards the top 5 has been succeeded by your Botherbeek. You've got to praise him for what has been exceptional strategy today. He's been able to sort of nip at the heels for some time on quite a few of his contemporaries, but he's been playing the thinking man's game here in the GT3 division and finds himself into that top 5, all things said and done. Now he's got 10 minutes between now and the checkered flag to make true on his commitments to the top 5. Luca Tamburini is nearest to him at this time, off by about 2 corners. One slip, and it could be Tamburini's chance for a top 5. That was exceptional stuff, though, by Joe Botherbeek. With Manuel Lamos still in the pit lane, it could still very well be a retirement here for the number 91. He makes now 3 cars in the pit lane. There is Lamoth in the 91. Alongside him, Thomas Ferre and Stephen Sutton. Ten minutes left to go then in this race. I will just note as well, the gap between Hodek and Overbeek, 4.3 seconds and fluctuating there. Anywhere between 4.3 and 4.5 seconds. Now we'll see over the course of the next sector or so whether or not that is moving away or toward him. We can see now, just before Schwedenkreuz, it is moving away from your Botherbeek, but still, it does not diminish what he's been able to do today. Strategically, he has had this down to a fine art. He's made his way up to the top 5. What seems like almost impossible odds to clear, he has done the seemingly impossible. A fair play to him, and what a way to end his performance here in the Karussell Cup with a bit of tactical masterclass. Watching then from inside of the top 3 for just a moment, we are now looking to try and catch on board with Tom Breuer. Now we'll be watching on board extensively with the 159 for the last lap coming up not far from now. We'll get the full run through of things, as this is effectively the prelude for his Karussell Cup Championship title win. It is only about 8 minutes away from him now, and we can see the 159 has not lost any of the steam he has carried from the race start. Now, of course, that he's on brand new tyres, and they're finally primed into heat after one out lap there. You can see the last lap at 9 minutes 18. That factors for him being in the pit lane for quite some time. Out through Karussell, up towards Hohe Acht. We'll catch on with him in due course. Taking a look around the track here to see where the nearest gaps are concerned with. It was for the longest time between Hodek and Overbeek, but as you see now, catching back on with them, it's nearly up at 6 seconds between the 822 and the 284. So the chances for them two to fight is relying solely on whether or not Fabian Hodek finds any kind of trouble between now and the checkered flag 7 minutes and 20 seconds from now. Something to keep a close eye on here. Tom Wells, Luca Tamburini and Anthony Valorio. Now, they're the closest sort of cluster of vehicles on track right now. The 41, the 12 and the 813. And just to pay some attention to the gap, namely between Wells and Valorio. Now, this is one that I'm focusing on at this time. Now, we know as well that Wells and Tamburini were very close to fighting just before their run to the pit lane, and it was a bit of an upset for the number 12. He kicked his back end up and away through Flansgarten's 5. Very nearly ended his race with that incident. Fortunately, was able to keep running through Schwalbenschwanz up towards the Galgenkopf and Dottinger Hohe sections, where we then learned there was very little actually wrong with that Bentley. It was really did just tank the impact and kept on soldiering on. We're curious to see whether or not that Alexis can catch. Now, moreover, looking further up the line, we can see 3 seconds perhaps to close into just south of 3 seconds. Another high twos by the time we get down towards Stahlstrecke. Tom Wells is in pursuit of 6th place over Luca Tamburini. Now, both of them have missed out on the chances of a top 5 courtesy of Jorp Overbeek. We did see a huge snap out of oversteer there through Mudkurve. So in through Klostertal, he's dropped quite a few tenths of a second away from Tamburini. In towards Stahlstrecke we go. In towards the Karussell. It's their second to last time doing this in this championship. What has been 3 weeks of competition for some of these drivers. Now, catching on board then with Tom Breuer. We'll stay on board for the full final flying lap unless anything else grabs our attention here with the current race leader. He's led all but 1 lap of this race. That also was led by Jorp Overbeek. And with Breuer back in command of things, onto the final lap we go then. Through the GP section of the track, the GP Strecke, sometimes also known as in through the Yokohama S for the final time. We will pull up the telemetry here just to see if he is trying to challenge over his best. You can see fluctuating there between an improvement and a detriment in towards the forward curve. In through Bitten Warsteiner. Just still keeping an ear to the ground here on any updates from out of Wells, Tamburini or Valorio. We can still see those 3 on the minimap at the moment, making their way through Galgenkopf onto the Dottinger Hohe for their second to last time today. Tom Breuer into the Vidal chicane. Bit of a bumpy run there through the exit of the GP Strecke. Does put him nearly a 10th down. You can see just how much it's fluctuating here. I don't know if the data is all that accurate right now. Making our way into Hatzenbach. Now up towards the Flugplatz. Fortunately, the front end not catching any airtime this time around. We have seen it to be a case before. Up through Cottonbourne. Down towards Schwedenkreuz and Arenberg. Then into Poststrasse. Down through the Fuchsrohr then for the last time in towards Adenauer Forst. Must say it has been a proper shutdown performance here from Tom Breuer. He has completely closed off any chances for someone else to take a race win today. It has been absolute domination from Nissan, but bear in mind still over half of the track still left to go. Never say never on the chances of something going wrong, but I highly doubt with the way things have been today for him that is the case. Paying attention as well once again to the gap between the 813 and the 12. Things are still looking to close in, but I will say much closer now is the gap between the number 12 and the number 41. So eyes potentially towards Wells v Valorio before the end of round 3. We'll catch up with Tom Breuer in due course here. We are still on this final lap here in the Nordschleife for the final round of the HCCL Carousel Cup. Taking a look just down the road from Tom Breuer, 42 seconds down the road, mind you, is Mr. Scallops in second place for a Nissan 1-2 finish. This, I think, is the first time ever on TRTM we have seen the like. And running on a history of firsts, taking a look onto the back of those podium steps here as we swing through the grid, we see is Pascal Stolz looking to give Jaguar their first ever recorded podium in a manufacturer GT3 race. Now, of course, we've seen Jaguars on podiums aplenty over on the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series, but in its own element, surrounded by other contemporaries of the GT3 category, this is the first we've ever seen it. And on precarious conditions, we do find very odd results indeed coming up for Pascal Stolz. Took a risk and stuck with it, and we'll be seeing him commit to that tomorrow in the 2.4 hours of Spa in a charity race, same time out of Spa-Francorchamps. Looking just around the line here, we see what was the closest gaps at the moment, and that was between Tamburini, Wells and Valorio. As you can see, Valorio is gaining ground on Tom Wells, 1.3 seconds and closing. There could be one final push here for position before the end of this race. Out towards, by looks of it here, the run in through Exmuller, in towards the Asphalt Breitscheid. We're on board with Tom Wells in what could be a last lap dash for 7th place. Anthony Valorio, you can see right behind him there, 1.2 seconds off, out through Asphalt. Up the road from him by 3.5 seconds is Luca Tamburini. In the meantime, the 159 of Tom Breuer is up the road, 44 seconds clear of Mr. Scallops, his fellow Nissan, on what is their first ever 1-2 finish as a manufacturer in any event covered here on TRTN. In towards Schwalbenschwanz, not far from the line here, that 159 to see one last run of the Dottinger Hoa before the end of not only this round, but the end of the championship, of which he is set to become champion. Looking on with Wells, he is in a really tough spot here between a rock and a hard place. That Porsche has got him pitched for maneuverability, and that Lexus has got him pitched for straight line speed. Try as he may, that car has now become a jack of all trades and master of none. See here for Wells, makes collision with the wall out through Mutkurva, so this could give Anthony Valorio his chance to challenge. We are watching here with Wells, that fight for 7th place. In towards Stylestrucker we go. Anthony Valorio in hot pursuit. Will be cutting away from these two in a moment's time to see the 159 down towards the line. It's a very tough call here, as we will be seeing down towards the line the 159 not only to take the win, but to take the championship. It looks like wrapping this move up with a nice neat bow at the inside is Anthony Valorio, but loses momentum overall to Tom Wells. We'll catch up with these two in just a moment. We take a look back up the order to the perspective of Tom Breuer, making his way down towards the line. It was a win in GT4 with McLaren, and it has been absolute domination from the German talent in his home race here, heading down towards the line. He wins here in the Nürburgring twice on the trot, now in the GT3 wing, and that is more than enough to crown him the Carousel Cup champion. An exceptional performance by any stretch of the imagination, make no mistake of it. That was start to finish masterclass from Tom Breuer. Looking further around on the grid then, we have still a few stories left to wrap up here. Namely, is that fight for 7th place. We'll be seeing the rest of the podium to the checkered flag in a moment's time. So you see here the 394, which is Mr. Scallops, looking to give Nissan their first ever on TRTN history here. A Nissan 1-2 finish down to the line. Absolute domination from the GTR. A brilliant, brilliant result for the pair of them as well. And following on a history of firsts not far from now will be Jaguar's first ever podium. But let's get back on board with Wells v Valorio. We still have a story to wrap up here, and there is still an ongoing fight for 7th place. They're down towards, by looks of it here, the run in towards Flansgarten Zwei, by looks of it, on the way down towards Schwalbenschwanz. Just as we catch them down to this section here, you see Pascal Stolz making his way out of Tiergarten on a history of first here, where it's been the first ever Nissan 1-2 finish. It's a first ever for Jaguar on the podium, courtesy of Pascal Stolz. A gamble worth making then. He tried it with Maserati and it didn't succeed. He tries again with Jaguar and makes it stick. Back on board with these two then. Fabian Hodek, by the way, about to put the BMW M6 in the top 5. And Jorp Overbeek, I will say, a proper standout performance strategically to get himself up through the order on what look like very uncertain odds for him today. The Dutchman into the top 5 at the end of round 3. Hodek 4th, and across the line a moment from now, Jorp Overbeek to 5th place. Luca Tamburini looks to take 6th, but we're still watching with bated breath to see what is the story for the fight of 7th place. Tom Wells is in a very vulnerable spot here, because here you can see coming up very, very quickly is Anthony Valorio rocketing up to his side, out through Antonius Booker, down towards Tiergarten. It could be a last lap move here between Lexus and Bentley. Battle of the Titans, down towards Tiergarten, up to 7th goes Anthony Valorio, much to the chagrin of Tom Wells. Heading down to the line, it's not over just yet. A little bit of an uneasy exit there for Valorio. Could make it a drag race, but by just a few hundredths of a second in difference there, just brings it up to about a 10th, 2/10 as a matter of fact. Anthony Valorio 7th, Tom Wells in 8th. Asahi Ota looking at 9th place. It's definitely been a questionable race for some, but it has been absolute world dominance by Nissan. A 1-2 finish. Tom Breuer, your champion of the Karussell Cup, a very short-lived championship. Bear in mind, he started this run a round down. We didn't see him in the M2s. We saw him in the GT4s, and more than ever do we see him today. He's your champion here for the Karussell Cup and 2-time race winner in both GT4 and GT3. Mr. Scallops in 2nd, Pascal Stoltz in 3rd, Fabian Hodek in 4th, Jorp Overbeek in 5th, Luca Tamburini 6th, Anthony Valorio in 7th, Tom Wells in 8th, and Asahi Ota in 9th place. Manuel Lamoth, DNF in this race, and he's not alone in that one. Alessandro Litti, Alexander Kruger, James Mason, Thomas Ferry, and Stephen Sutton. A large tally there of DNFs in what has been a brutal round here at the Nordschleife, but what a way to round this season out. A last lap dash there for Anthony Valorio for 7th place. Strategic witchcraft there for Jorp Overbeek for a top 5. Jaguar's first ever podium in a multi-manufacturer race on TRTN. That comes out of Pascal Stoltz. He's been taking quite some lofty gambles with vehicle choice, and he'll be doing the same story tomorrow when he competes in the 172 Jaguar at the 2.4 hours of Spa. But your real overarching story, Nissan 1-2 finish, and ahead of them both, Tom Breuer. That has been quite a magical session for this one here. We saw it all the way from the start of that qualifying session. It was poetry in motion in the way he conducts that car. He conducts that Nissan like a symphony orchestra here in this championship. It was no surprises to anyone. He'd be winning in the GT3s, and moreover, elevating himself from that performance out of GT4. It's back-to-back wins, and that's enough in a very short championship, mind you, but enough for the Karussell Cup championship title. And it has been quite something today then. We do wait to see for the official tally of results to come through. We are still actually without that, but you can see these are your official results right now. 9 cars finished this race of what started as a 15-car grid. It was brutal for our drivers, but that's the end of the line here on TRTN. For our coverage of the HCCL Karussell Cup, it's been a real pleasure from us over the course of the last couple of weeks here. 3 weeks, very short and sweet series to get us towards the Christmas season. And we're not done just yet with the folks over at HCCL. Moreover, we're not done with broadcasting, as we do have a few extra projects coming up just before Christmas. Right now, though, for the greater majority of championships, we'll be seeing them wind down in the coming week. We still have one more activity here with HCCL. That comes up tomorrow at 2 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. That's 9 a.m. Eastern, and that'll be for the 2.4 hours of Spa, a charity race for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. And we'll be looking forward to that one as well. For those of you joining us later on this evening, we're only about an hour and 20 minutes away from the start of the 6 hours of Silverstone. So no rest for the wicked for us here on TRTN. We've still got plenty more to do. We're going to be very, very busy this weekend. 4 events, of which we've just got the first out of the way. Next coming is the 6 hours of Silverstone, then the 2.4 hours of Spa, and then the NLRL Sunday League in Alton Park. That's all from us here on TRTN. We'll be seeing some of you in an hour and 20 minutes time. For the rest of you, we'll be seeing you next time. Until then, take care. Good night.